on to another episode of the Retro Football Review. I'm your host, Kirk Buchner. I run NotInHallOfFame.com and a bunch of other stuff because I don't seem to know what else to do with my life. It's also the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame, the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. We've just set a date. On November 1st, we're going to announce the first ever class, and you can be a part of that. Vote now. I know Paul's voted.
Yes.
You can vote multiple times because you can vote once at least every day. www.notinhallofFame.com/USA. And we trademarked the United States Athletic Hall of Fame because no one came up with it. So there you go. So we're deciding who is the greatest actual American athletes. And it's all decided by all of you. It's pure democracy. I'm joined by Paul Lawrence, my good friend who just came back from the Pro Football Hall of Fame ceremony. I say just came back. We're recording this in August. This will probably not go up for maybe a couple months after, as I'm recording in bulk, as they say.
Yes.
Actually, as no one says. I don't know why I said that. That's not a popular expression at all, but I ran with it. We have recorded in the last little while Super Bowl 9-10, and we're going to do a game that's not very competitive, but is very, very important, and I'm so happy we did it. We're looking at Super Bowl 11. Or as I sort of like to call it, really the emergence of the modern Raiders, to me. We're going back to January 9th, 1977, to the Rose Bowl, which, and you can tell we're recording this much earlier, they were doing a lot of references to people who competed at the Rose Bowl, and I don't know what's happening to the Rose Bowl in the future with what the complete implosion of the Pac-10. I said to our good friend Evan Nolan on a show I did yesterday, if you would have put a gun to my head and said 5 years ago and said, okay, who's going to still be alive? The Pac-12 or the Sun Belt? Well, I know what I'm picking. I think I'm pretty safe.
Yeah, it hasn't played out that way. College football is a crazy, wild world. I think people knew it was coming. We've seen obviously a lot of conference realignment, a lot of teams and schools, moving around, and a lot of it with the big money and now the students having access to their own rights through NIL and things of that nature, the whole landscape. But I think the pace of what we've seen, here in the summer, in July and August, has just been mind-boggling in terms of all of the dominoes, and what you've yet to fall is changing, college sports, particularly football, in major ways that will, have ramifications for years, a lot of which is leading up to the expansion of the playoff system and all of the billions of dollars of revenue around that. But we're just seeing it play out.
Not just football.
Tremendous way. Yeah. And it's going to, I was reading an article today. There are, for example, some women's softball players that are complaining because they went to a certain school in a conference that they had fans and their family could come to, and all of a sudden they're in a conference now, and they're going to have to travel thousands of miles more. Many of the sports, football travels on chartered planes. Many of these schools, other athletes, you're doing it by van or by bus, and these are student athletes, and so the amount of time they're going to have out of their lives purely to travel to games across the country in some of these conferences is going to have a huge impact to student athletes way beyond the big name sports like football and men and women's basketball, which is we think of the college sports. But the whole landscape is just shifting, and we won't know, but it's going to have huge impacts way beyond just some of the conferences and some of the schools. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think that's why I think I was mentioning before we went on air that another show I do, the Classic Sports Review with Glenn. I was goofing on some show, like some that are really not sports, but I do want to do. Maybe I might reach out to maybe Longhorn Dave. I should do the same idea only with college football, because nothing's changing more than that. I don't know. I'll get there eventually. But today we're looking at the Minnesota Vikings and the Oakland Raiders. At this point, two teams that had never won, but had been there before. Minnesota 3 times, Oakland once, although there's only 4 players on this team. But either way, we're 0 for 4. Vikings 0 for 3, Raiders 0 for 1. The Raiders come in as 4-point favorites, so let's ask how we got here. With Minnesota, they had a lot of the same stars that we just talked about. Bud Grant as your coach, Tarkenton, Foreman. But defensively, the stars, they're getting older. Page, Eller, Marshall. They mentioned how the front four for Minnesota has a combined 47 years of experience going into this. That's good, but it's also not good. And we saw a bit of that play out, but they had an easier run in the playoffs than actually Oakland did. Finished with 11-2-1 record, beat Washington 35-20, then the Rams 24-13. Amazingly, this is our first look at Oakland in the series. Have been good for a long time, but we decided in that first Super Bowl we weren't going to cover it. It just wasn't. We felt, and I think accurately so, not iconic enough to go with that. But they came in 13-1. And I wrote down, this is the year that I thought really made them cool. I mean, you're led by John Madden, who, as I was watching this, I could see why. Holy shit, beer commercial! I want this guy. I'm
yeah. I mean, he doesn't really fit your sort of prototypical quarterback, especially when you think about the 1970s, right? And as you mentioned, the Raiders had some success in the 70s, but always were stymied by a major, often a very controversial or big play loss against their hated rivals, whether it be the Dolphins. I don't know why my background is completely wrong for this game, but I better switch that over in a minute. But they just hadn't much. But getting back to Madden, when you think about him, you think of the great head coaches, right, of this era. Yeah, Don Shula, Chuck Noll, Tom Landry, and you look at all of those guys, you go, they look like coaches, right? They kind of look like the prototype, and then you look at John Madden, great coach, but yeah, I don't mean to get at his appearance as much, but his demeanor and the way he coached the team was much different than those sort of classic guy. Even the guy across the field from him, right? Looked quite different. That is being, of course,
Grant. Well, I felt, Madden was blue collar. It's like he looked like the guy who could be your cool uncle or the guy you want to do a fishing trip with. Or, okay, if you're going to the bar, got Madden in one corner, Chuck Noll in one, Tom Landry in the other, Bud Grant. Who are you going to and you want to hang out with? It's John Madden. And it's so sad that other than our good friend Vinny Laspinosa, how you doing, Vin? Most people 25 or under think that John Madden is a game developer. Of course, they're also the same people who think that that George Foreman is a chef.
Yeah, and we kind of get why guys like that have become celebrities, right? And then used their careers to kind of grow in a much bigger commercial and other economic and other careers post playing. And we kind of get where John Madden went as a broadcaster and then developing, of course, with EA, the first major, what many people for major football video game. But people lose sight. I think, they don't understand the history. For a guy who got in the Hall of Fame, yes, other things were going on there, but his coaching career was quite stellar.
It was.
Short, but very stellar.
Yeah. So you've got your rebel quarterback in Ken Stabler. I want to point out that Ken Stabler and Chris Christopherson have never been in the same room, I don't think. He's got his great wide receivers in Cliff Branch and Fred Biletnikoff. Your O-line, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell. They were characterized as a hyper-aggressive team defensively. You got the veteran Willie Brown, Ted Hendricks, and we'd see a lot of other great characters here. This was, my God, I just enjoy. Yeah, we're going to talk about that one too. That image you just popped up. I am so excited about this. But Oakland, I mentioned, had a tough first stop, and this is a PSA on behalf of Evan Nolan, my partner in the Hall of Fame show. Oakland apparently should not be here because New England should have been. They were screwed over from a call. What did he say? It was a pass interference call, I believe.
No.
Oh, not pass interference. Roughing the passer. Either way, they overcame an 11-point deficit. I haven't actually watched it. I think I will now that I've sort of been talking about that, but I didn't have time to sort of get into that. I forget that New England had some good teams in the 70s. You don't think of them as being any good in the 70s. It's like all of a sudden, poof, they appeared for a blip in 1986, went away again, and then it's like they never existed. But
and I think the commentators, when we watched this game, they did mention the issue with that
they did.
game. But yeah, we won't reveal a lot right now because as we get into this, the Raiders are built with characters. I mean, we talk about players who have character, and then you have players who are characters, and we'll be able to highlight a lot of these guys. And if you're a fan of the Raiders, and many of those fans are Raiders Nation, they think fondly about the 70s, and some of these players would continue in the 80s with some success with the Raiders. But there's a great assemblage of guys that we'll be able to talk about here. Getting back quickly to Madden, I mean, he was a coach that could just make all this work, right? Even with all these personalities and how they approach the game. And, right from the owner, Al Davis, they're kind of anti-league, anti-NFL. They came out of of course, they out of the AFL. They were a regional franchise there in 1960, and Al Davis was the owner through all of this time. And they anti-establishment, you name it, in this era in the mid 70s, they represent all of that.
Just win, baby.
It comes out. It comes out in the players, it comes out in the game. And so we'll be able to kind of highlight that for folks of a really interesting team. And this is one of the motivations we had about doing this game, even though we knew historically not the greatest game, but it's going to be, I think, our best opportunity to capture the prime 70s era around the Raiders. And here we are in Oakland.
They also should mention they beat Pittsburgh in the AFC final, but there's a bit of an asterisk there because they beat them 24-7, but Blyer and Franco Harris were not in the game, so hence he's an asterisk, especially based on what we just talked about in our last two episodes, how important that running game.
And that was a Pittsburgh's team, right? That would have had a legitimate shot the first time in Super Bowl history to try to get back to win 3 in a row. That was sort of on their plate. And of course, as we're going to hear in future episodes, they managed to make it back and build on that. But at that juncture, they were literally seen going in the 1976 season here as a legitimate threat. The Steelers were to win, the first team to win 3 consecutive Super Bowls. But it was not to be, given what you just pointed out. The Raiders were able to, I guess some would say, take advantage of the fact that the Steelers were not at 100%. And the Raiders and the Steelers, I mean, they had a bitter rivalry in the 1970s. I mean, bitter, brutal, whatever you want to call it. And that played out a lot in the playoffs between these two teams. And this season, the Raiders were able to get revenge or push themselves into the Super Bowl.
There must have been a lot of talk about that because the commentators, and I'll mention who they are now. It's NBC. We got Kirk Gowdy, and Don Meredith, who was fantastic.
Andy Don.
I enjoyed him a lot more than I did in previous calls that we've sort of watched him. But they've sort of mentioned before how it's not the two. Some people are saying it's not the 2 best teams. Well, what are you going to do? You play against who you have. So Pittsburgh wasn't 100%. What are they supposed to do? Wait a couple months. Say, we want to be fair. We want to wait until Franco's 100%. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel right. That's football. You don't do that.
Well, the Raiders had a great season, though. I mean, their season record is fantastic. All the pieces are there. Stabler finished as the top-rated passer in the AFC. They got the receivers, they got all the pieces. The defense is there. They got a good running game. They got that great offensive line. And as you mentioned, the Vikings have built this team, and they have not also had that success. So maybe given where the conferences were and how the playoffs kind of emerged, maybe one could say there could have been a better team. But these are still neither one of these teams. As this season went through the 76 team in the playoffs. These are good, solid playoff teams. None of them got there, and they deserved it in the sense of these are 2 very good, deserving teams. It wasn't a fluke. Again, playoffs and the ball bounces a funny way and calls. We get all that. But I guess what I'm pointing out is, going to the season, these were 2 top teams, and had players and stats to put them among the league leaders in their conference, I should say, in that 76 seasons. So we have two really good teams, is I guess what we're getting at
Sure.
here.
And even when you get in, let's say like now as a 6 or a 7, right?
Yeah.
What was it? The Ravens won as a number 6,
Mm-hmm.
and they were, no one was thinking like, oh my God, they don't deserve to be here because they didn't have as good a regular season as everyone else. They came in with the most momentum. I don't remember if they were favored in every game, but nobody was. They sure as hell weren't like double-digit underdogs or anything like that. You play with what you if you make it, and that's in any main team sport, it's no easy row.
Well, yeah, and you know the Raiders won. They were 13-1, right? And the Vikings were 11-2-1.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're not talking about, you say, about two teams who have stumbled in the playoffs and got a few lucky breaks, right? And were a lower seed and had poor seasons. You maybe want to argue, like you're saying, is maybe they weren't the number one team in either conference, but they got to be second best, which is still pretty good because these records and these players and the stats, their season stats, individual and as teams, back up that these are two good, solid, legitimate teams going into the Super Bowl. So
absolutely. We watched this on the official YouTube NFL channel. We didn't have one that had all the great commercials that I love to rip.
Yeah, darn it.
But there'll be some. Well, we have a bonus later. We'll get there. So it's a cold open. Fred Cox is kicking off for Minnesota. Returned by Oakland's Carl Garrett for 23 yards. Garrett's an interesting player. Ninth season, only had one more, 4,197 rushing yards, 28 touchdowns. And he's part of something we talked about before. He was part of that rescinded trade with Dwayne Thomas.
That's right.
Yeah. So like he went there, and then when everything just flopped, he was sent back. So it's fascinating how, you know, Thomas went to, because we mentioned to dominate that Super Bowl that he should have won an MVP for, got screwed out of that. But Garrett here is now finally getting sort of his chance to shine, well, shine-ish, you know, because he's certainly not the top guy, but he's here. Oakland 1st and 10 on their own 33, and we're going to meet the Oakland offense. Quarterback Ken Stabler, running back Clarence Davis, fullback Mark Van Egan. I want to mention also first here too, as Paul and I are doing this, we're also having a great kick of watching the production and the graphics sort of change. And as they're announcing them, I guess maybe they took it the week before maybe or something, because they're not in their regular gear. There's clouds behind them. Some of them are wearing sunglasses. Maybe it's a media day. I don't know.
Could be.
But it was great. I loved it. Our receivers, Fred Biletnikoff, Cliff Branch. I can't wait to talk more about Biletnikoff. Tight end Dave Casper, and our O-line. Oh, and what an O-line it is, especially on the left side. Left tackle Art Shell. Left guard Gene Upshaw. Center Dave Dolby. Right guard George Bueller, right tackle John Vella. And I can't say enough about this O-line. Also, and I will say a lot more, especially later as we sort of get to trying to figure out who the MVP should be. Because I think there's like 5 people. There was no clear-cut person. All right,
and I think the argument could be made. You know, we probably have to think it through a little more, but I think the argument can be made at this juncture of Super Bowl history. We're looking at that is probably arguably the best offensive line that we've seen in a Super Bowl in a lot of ways. And as you notice, as we go through the game, you're going to see that bear out in terms of how the game unfolds. But I mean, you got two guys in Upshaw and Shaw who are still today regarded as likely in the top 10 all time of their position, given where we are many, many years later, and to have them on the same offensive line, peak or in that kind of time frame. So yeah, it's a great. And Ken Stabler, I mean, we're talking more about him we go, but a lefty, which is kind of unique to see. And again, kind of like we did the coach comparison of how Madden doesn't kind of match up with how we think of the coaches of that era. this guy doesn't match up with the quarterbacks. He doesn't match up with the guy on the other side, Frank Tarkin, in terms of the play of the game or his approach to playing, as so we say. Doesn't line up with guys like Captain America, Roger Staubach, and even guys like Bradshaw and some other quarterbacks we've highlighted. He was a unique character all on his own. I'm sure we're going to highlight that as we go on. But you watch this and you can see some skill, especially the way the Raiders and the deep ball emphasis they've had ever since they were in the AFL. And again, as we've talked about how the game is changing in front of our eyes as we watch this. The Steelers in the Super Bowl before, right? We saw the big plays to Swan as being critical to that win against the Cowboys. And here we're going to see how the big play kind of like, high risk, but a great reward in terms of the deep vertical passing game. You're going to see it here. You're going to see a quarterback and an offensive system and a coach and even an owner who just advocated. This is what they wanted. You'd be able to show those weapons, speed and depth, and have a quarterback who get the ball down the field like that. We saw a little bit with Bradshaw in the previous Super Bowl, but we're really going to see it here with both quarterbacks, but especially I think with Stabler, because the Raiders were go deep kind of team in a lot of ways, more than we've seen.
Not reflective in this game so much, but
we're seeing bits and pieces of it. But yeah,
absolutely, yeah. But I guess back to your point there, it's no wonder that Fran Tarkenton was going to be the host of That's Incredible, and Ken Stabler would be in a bunch of beer commercials. That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think so. If you're looking for your spokesman, and you want them to match the brand and the marketing campaign, that's the way to do it.
Oh, for sure. So our Minnesota defense, very similar to what we've talked about just recently. Our front forward, left defensive end Carl Eller, left defensive tackle Doug Sutherland, right defensive tackle Alan Page, right defensive end Jim Marshall. They said, I should have checked to see if this record's been broken, but they said that Marshall was the oldest starter in a Super Bowl. I don't know if that's since changed.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah. Marshall wasn't done. He still played another few years. So our linebackers on the left is Matt Blair. The middle linebacker, Jeff Seaman. He had one hell of a game.
Yep.
Which you don't think of that based on the score, but he really did. Right linebacker, Wally Hilgenberg. And our secondary, left corner, Nate Wright. Right corner, Bobby Bryant. Strong safety, Jeff Wright. And free safety, Paul Krause, who had to do a lot too today.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing the Vikings, this era of the Vikings, they're sort of at their peak. In fact, some of these guys, like you mentioned earlier, right, are older, a little older. They're getting a little beaten up. And I think for a lot of, in the context of the time, maybe not, but now that we look back, this was really going to be the 70s Vikings. This was going to be their shot, right? You mentioned their struggles in the playoffs and not winning Super Bowls. This was, for them, this was really going to be this roster and many of these players. This was going to be probably their best and last opportunity to win a Super Bowl because just age of the roster and turnover of players and the challenges and lack of at least Super Bowl success. They've been a great playoff team, regular season team, a lot of great players. We're going to highlight many of them that had great seasons, but this is probably the pinnacle of the 70s Vikings, and this is their opportunity to kind of win the big game, like we talked about the Cowboys earlier in the 60s and early 70s. Finally, no longer being next year's championship and winning Super Bowl VI. The Vikings are kind of at that point. Like this is really it with veterans guys, but can they overcome the Raiders is going to be the key questions here. But fairly, I think, evenly matched teams in a lot of ways. So I don't think going in, I don't recall what the Vegas line was on the game. But
4 points for Oakland.
Yeah, so that's not.
No.
It's reasonable. That's indicating a fairly close match. So we'll see how the game plays out, though.
Well, let's see. The Raiders start off on the ground with Clarence Davis. We'll talk about him right now. He only gets a 1 yard rush. This was his best year in football, 787 yards, but he got injured the year after, and he only played 2 more games with 4 more yards. So after this game, all he ever got was 4 more yards. Retired with 3,640 and 26 TDs. But we're going
to isn't it great, Kurt? So all these games, we find a couple guys like this, right? who like have had a good career and a good season, and this is the end of it, right?
Yeah,
It's just kind of interesting to see, and injury or performance or whatever. But how many guys we pointed out in Super Bowls that had a good game or a good season, and this is it. They
yeah.
they're done or they play a little bit more, but this is kind of the pinnacle they reached, and it's kind of interesting to see in games like this. And often they're not names we would associate right with a
Absolutely.
Pro Bowl or All Pro, but they play a great game, but this is the end. For lack of, it's kind of the end of their career in many ways for these guys. It's kind of interesting how many times that pops up when we talk about these games.
Some have an idea, some don't. I don't think Davis
Yeah,
did.
yeah, you never know, right? In this era with injuries and they're not making a lot of money, right? And you never know. Guys could be, they can see themselves, or people can see them as a rising star or becoming a starter, but this is it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to when we do the whole Saints Super Bowl. Obviously, I'm going to have a lot to say on that. And I've had this argument with people who will tell me Reggie Bush is a bust. Reggie Bush was a very well done distraction and a huge part of that win.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to sort of saying that. We also have to do that Bounty Gate game.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because at some point, well, it's funny. We started off with, well, yeah, because we didn't start off with a Super Bowl. So at some point, we're going to get to another key playoff game. I promise, and we'll do a lot, and we'll probably keep doing this until we're even older. I say until we're old. Paul and I, before we went on, we're talking about how old we are.
I think by now people have been watching this long enough, and our familiarity with many of the cultural aspects of what goes on in these Super Bowls in the 70s kind of dates us to something that isn't surprising or is not unfamiliar to us, since I think they can figure out and do the math to realize we are of that era, shall we say.
Well, to be fair, I'm just maybe a couple years younger because I don't remember these. When we get to the Eagles Raiders, that's the first one I remember.
Yeah.
But as growing up in Canada, my first focus was hockey.
But a lot of the cultural references we're dropping here,
Yeah.
we're familiar with.
There you go. Well, as good as Davis was, his backmate Van Egan had a better year. He had a 4-yard run, but this was his breakout. First time that he ever had over 4 digits in rushing, 1,012. He'd be a Pro Bowler the year after. So this was his first of 3 straight with over 1,000. So Stabler, there, I just sort of, I wrote this down here. I would just said throughout his life always looked like an older Chris Christopherson.
Yeah.
I got to stop doing my bits early when I already have them written down. He's given so much time by his offensive line, and he's got Dave Casper wide open. We're also seeing it through the series, just tight ends evolve their role. But one thing that hasn't changed is just you get your tight end just coming out of nowhere. Well, that doesn't happen now because you're expecting them to do more, but
yeah, and nowadays, of course, we have more and more linebackers and safeties and defensive backs, and not but by strategy and by design, but also by skill set and tech and talent, being able to cover tight ends. So tight ends are becoming more hybrid like receivers in today's game. But you're right, in this era, I think we pointed out the last couple Super Bowls we've looked at, we've started to see the threat. Not that there weren't great passing tight ends in the past, guys like John Mackey and Mike Ditka, but the role they're playing and the strategy in which tight ends are being used as a passing threat is quickly evolving. It would continue in the 70s and really explode with guys like Ozzie Newsome in the 80s. But of that era, Dave Casper in the 70s is one of the great tight ends, and you can see why the talent, but also how they use him. And this play was a classic example of that.
yeah, and this was his first year of a run of greatness. 691 yards, 10 touchdowns, which doesn't seem super special now, but it was, and it was the first of 4 straight first-team All-Pros.
Yeah.
As for Stabler that you mentioned, he was the 1974 MVP, third in voting this year. Could have probably easily have been the MVP. Burt Jones won it, which I don't know. Maybe he shouldn't have. Because Stabler was the leader in passes with 27 and a passer rating of 103.4. I think you mentioned that also too. They said later on that this was the first time that they had two passers over 100 in a year in a season. I think that maybe the first time they ever had anyone do that, and both him and Jones were able to do that. His pass completion percentage was 66.7. Again, that's our bare minimum now, or not bare minimum, but for that era, they were raving about it. He gets 2 out of 3.
Yeah. No, it is a pretty incredible benchmark. We're not seeing the West Coast influence, which would come in, and this would become more common in the 80s, the higher completion rate, which also would drive a higher passer rating. We're not there with that kind of game. But yeah, we are seeing excuse the expression, but the evolution yet again of offenses. And we are seeing the shift to more passing, although running is still dominating, will be in this game. But that's a good stat to point out, that we're seeing more passing touchdowns, higher completion rate. We're still seeing a lot of interceptions by quarterbacks, but we are seeing that evolution of more accurate quarterbacks, even in this case that are in the case I mentioned before with Stabler, who are going deep on a lot of occasions. So it is something we have not seen quite in a Super Bowl yet, of that kind of evolution or emergence of accuracy being so critical to quarterback success.
For also other side note, finishing second in MVP voting was Jack Lambert.
Yeah,
we saw a lot of them. We're gonna see a lot more. So Oakland's got 1st and 10 on the Minnesota 36. Davis rushes to the outside, gets 4. Eller gets the tackle. The O-line, oh man, carves a huge hole for Davis, rushes for 20. He was untouched until Paul Krause had to get him. And Paul Krause had to do a lot more than he normally had to do. In terms of that, I mean, or in terms of tackling rushers, I should say.
I mean, it was a key role for safeties at the time, but you're right. I mean, you're not going to be successful as a defense against the run if your safety is having to make all the tackles.
I think I had like an interesting stat at the end. Krause would have 15 tackles. I think it was Krause.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's great for him, and it's great as a player to be able to have that ability and skill. But it is an indicator of the challenges they faced against the running game here, because that should not happen, right?
I should have actually. I didn't really look at that until the end. I should. If I'd have known that going in, I would have sort of like looked at what the breakdown tackle of rushers or. Oh well, it doesn't matter. Oakland is 1st and 10 on the Minnesota 12. Garrett comes in, tackled for a 1-yard loss. Jeff Seaman got that, and Seaman was probably the second best defensive player, or maybe the best defensive player, depending on your point of view, for Minnesota. This was his 4th and final Pro Bowl this year, but he wasn't done. He had another 5 years, all with Minnesota. Top 30 Viking maybe of all time, which says a lot, I think. 2nd and 11, Stabler had to throw it away, and on 3rd and 11, a curious call. They bring in Peter Banaszak. Banaszak is one of the 4 guys who was on Super Bowl II roster for Oakland. His second to last year, he only rushed for 214 yards, but was 5 touchdowns. And then I looked at his overall stat line. So 3,772 rushing yards, 1,222 receiving, 52 touchdowns. Over 50 touchdowns and less than 5,000 yards from scrimmage? What the hell?
Yeah. Talk about your specialty running back right there, right? And that's that's probably why we got him in the game here, right?
Yeah. That's his role. Also, too, only 18 career fumbles. That's this. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, you're talking, like you said, you've got your cast of characters and perfect role players, and this guy was a role. Although it was a little, the commentators weren't sure why they were using it. Neither was I. This is not for him to do. He rushed for 2 yards. I don't know what they were thinking here.
Yeah.
But Matten's gonna. It's a rare miss. I mean, I'm armchair quarterback from 40 years in the past or in the future.
We don't know, right? I mean, they may have been setting this up for a play later in the game, but you're right. Given the context where they are in the field, and how their offense was run and structured, it does seem to be a bit of an odd play call and a player in the game. And so it makes you wonder what was going on there. What were they trying to do? What were they trying to show the Vikings?
Right.
And I don't know, but it didn't work.
That's right. It's all
At the
just.
end of the day, it didn't work.
No, it didn't work. It was only 2 yards. So Oakland goes for the field goal. Their kicker is Arrowman, and this is his second last year. He was for the year 20-28 for field goals. So I'm thinking he should be able to make a 28-yard attempt. He doesn't. He hits it right. Hits the not the crossbar, but the
Upright.
Upright.
We got ourselves a single doink.
Single doink, yeah. I wrote down, this is only going to be relevant for this week. It was more accurate than Megan Rapinoe's penalty kick. And how ironic is it that, and I don't know who, I took this off somebody on Twitter, I don't remember who. And they said, how ironic is it that Megan Rapinoe ended her soccer career by going far right?
Yeah. Bada bing, bada boom.
Not my joke. I wish it was. Gowdy is shitting all over man. I don't mean to make him sound worse, which is basically, it's like, I don't want to mean to insult you, or I don't want to.
Exactly.
And then you go on to do that. And then he made a rare verbal gaffe. He says he wasn't the guy, because George Blanda was hurt. And it's like, George Blanda? I checked that out. No, he retired the year before because he was hurt. They already had rookie Fred Steinfort, who we would mention later. Because Blanda was released in the preseason. Steinfort won the job, but he got injured during the season. So that's a rare verbal miscue. But I thought that was sort of interesting because I had to check that. Like, that can't be right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Minnesota's got it on their own 20, so let's meet the offense. We've met a lot of these people before. Some are new. Quarterback Fran Tarkenton. Running back Chuck Foreman. Fullback Brent McClanahan. Wide receivers are Sammy White and Ahmad Rashad. White was the offensive rookie of the year. So, it's, I guess, the optimist, if you lose this game and you're a Vikings fan, you're still reloading. We've got White. Rashad looks promising. Well, promising. Rashad was already a 4-year vet, but White looked to be the emerging superstar. Turned out the other way, but so be it. Tight end Stu Voigt. And our offensive line, Steve Riley at left tackle, Charles Goodrum at left guard, veteran center Mick Tinglehoff, right guard Ed White, and right tackle Ron Yeri. The Oakland defense. Left defensive end John Matuzak. Nose tackle Dave Rowe, right defensive end Otis Strunk, and our linebackers, left offensive line Phil Villapiano, left inside Monty Johnson, right inside Willie Hall, right outside Ted Hendricks, and our secondary, and what a good one it was. Left cornerback Skip Thomas. We'll be talking about him a lot. Right corner Willie Brown. Short safety. Strong safety George Atkinson, and free safety Jack Tatum. I wrote down, and it turned out this was the case because they mentioned it later. Is this the first time we're looking at a 3-4 in all this that we've been doing? And it is.
Yep.
Apparently the first time anyone ever went to the Super Bowl with a 3-4.
That is correct. And it was sort of the Raiders were the stalwart of that, right? In the 70s. It was certainly counter to what a lot of the successful teams that we've talked about, and we'll highlight some more as they work through the 70s, right? That ran the 4-3. So they were an outlier to that, and it's a system they stuck with. And you're right. I mean, they had the personnel, and they built this with the personnel and the characters, whether it was talent, toughness, attitude, craziness, whatever, in the mix to build this what is really a great defense. And we're going to highlight a lot of them. And what I kind of find surprising about this game is we're going to hear from guys we normally wouldn't. There were some guys on both sides of the team, of both teams here, who I don't think going in this game we necessarily really knew a lot about or thought they played a major role. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna hear some names come up. You mentioned a couple already for the Vikings, and as we go through the play-by-play here with the Raiders, especially on defense, we're going to hear a couple guys who I don't think most people, unless you're a die-hard Raiders fan, would be familiar with them. But they had some big games. Some of these guys that don't have the kind of profile of some of the other guys who we're also going to mention. Because there's a lot of fun stories to go through with this group.
There are some iconic Raiders who became more famous for an attitude and then what they accomplished in acting or whatever, just sort of like looking
Yep.
a certain part. We're going to be talking a lot more about one. I actually have a game show for you set up for it, by the way. So be ready. I'm going to put on
All
my
right.
game show host voice. That is actually my ultimate goal. I'm hoping this will springboard me into being the host of a dating show.
There we go.
Ah,
Yeah.
why not? Why not? Because all
Why
the
not?
dating show hosts are unassuming and
Yeah.
a bit sarcastic. That
You
would
got
be
that covered.
well, this isn't a good drive, but they're starting the way you'd think they would. Tarkenton passes to Chuck Foreman because Chuck Foreman pretty much is Minnesota offense. He rushes for only one and a little bit more on Foreman's year. This was his fourth of 5 Pro Bowls. A really good year overall. 1,155 rushing yards, 567 receiving yards, and 14 touchdowns overall. Pretty good.
Yeah, and I think at some point during the play-by-play, it's later on in the game, they point out they say he's one of the top 3 running backs in the NFL.
Yeah.
The other two being Mr. Simpson and Mr. Walter Payton. So that's a pretty good crowd to be in, and Chuck Foreman is a great running back who's largely been forgotten for a variety of reasons. We can get into this through the game, but you watch this game. And the dual threat, he wasn't the first dual threat. Let's make clear about that, and they make it clear. But oh my, when you watch him play this game, it is incredible, and you realize why, although his peak might have been a bit shorter and didn't have the career numbers of some of these other great running backs, and the 70s had lots of great running backs. He doesn't get kind of that level of attention, but when you just base it on the play, watching him play, it was the most remarkable thing for me just to go back and see this. I've seen highlights of this game that just kind of look at all fresh from beginning to end. And he's a guy who really jumps, as they say, jumps out off the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's all here, and we see it in this game.
Yeah. And a lot of, although stat-wise there would be, Davis would have a better day, Foreman was the engine. I mean, if you know that, you're working against that particular part.
And no doubt, I mean, the announcers are talking about this. No doubt the Raiders knew he was the biggest threat.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vikings knew that going in, so there's a bit of gamemanship going there, I suspect. But he's going to play a big role, and he's going to get loose here a few times on the field and make some big plays. Mm-hmm. And so you can tell he's a centerpiece of the entire game in some respects, I think, in terms of how this all plays out, in terms of the chances for the Vikings and what the Raiders need to do.
Here's a question for you, because you and I are obviously both very, very much into Halls of Fame. If you don't know that about Paul, what's your Twitter handle?
It's Pro Football Hall of Fame guy, Paul. That's me.
There you go. So you can tell why we became friends. Minnesota wins one of these. Who has a better shot to get into the Hall of Fame, Foreman or Jim Marshall?
I think Foreman.
Okay.
I mean, I think it helps Marshall's case a lot, and probably does help him. But I think it really would be, if you excuse the expression, the cherry on top of the sundae. Yeah. It really would. I mean, Foreman has a lot on his resume that looks pretty good. Again, he has that issue where, in terms of career rushing stats, which was a big deal for voters when they looked at running backs from the 70s and in the 80s, is one reason why Roger Craig is having a tough time getting in the Hall. We can talk about that another time. But this would have really, yeah. And we assume if the Vikings win, he would have been a big part of it. That's pretty clear. So I think, yeah, I think he is an example, and it's really unfortunate. I hate to think about a guy who's that close, and to no fault of his own, that the team doesn't win the Super Bowl, and yet it hurts his case for the Hall of Fame. And to think about, would one game make a difference for a guy? And we know there's guys in the Hall that it did. And we know that there are guys who aren't in the Hall
because of one game.
And I think he's one of those guys. If somebody said to me, name a few guys who won Super Bowl win, right, would have made the difference, Chuck Foreman would be on that list for me.
I'll throw one in the modern era. He hasn't retired yet, and that's Cam Newton.
Yeah. Yeah, we obviously know, auto fans do, right? You could come out, you could, in the modern, more recent era, you could tick these guys off in your hand, right? And we know there's a bunch of them. And I haven't sat down and make a list of thinking how I would rank them up. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is it's very unfortunate. No fault of his own. They didn't. This game did not go their way, and he would have. It would have really. I think it still would have taken some time to get elected. But as a senior, he would have been a major contender. Whereas now, he's largely. I hate to say it, an afterthought.
He seems behind Larry Allen even in the pecking order somehow. No, that's not a shot at Larry Allen.
Yeah,
but anyway, Foreman can't do it on third because Tarkenton threw it a little too early, so Vikings are going to have to punt. Neil Clabo is their punter. He only had a 3-year career. This was number 2. On the punt, we've got a clipping call on Rodrigo Barnes, which negates the 24-yard return. I had to look up Barnes. This was his last ever game. He's a member of the Rice Sports Hall of Fame. Only 4 years in the pros, but pretty well traveled. Dallas, New England, Charlotte, the Charlotte Hornets. I had to do a double take, but of the World Football League, Miami and Oakland. When he was at Rice, he was an activist. He formed the first ever Black student union, and he was protesting to try and get more African Americans in coaching and in the faculty. Later on, he'd become an educator, got a master's, and he would later be a vice principal. So good on him. I love stories like that. So
yeah, that's great. I mean,
sometimes we see so many awful ones, don't we? Oakland keeps it on the ground on 1st and 10, 19. So Davis rushes for 4, Van Egan for 5, and on 3rd and 1, you bring in Van Zach. What does he know how to do? 3 yards and not necessarily a cloud of dust, but a thud. But that's okay. That's a first down.
Yeah, so we're seeing, Raiders running back by committee, right? And today, that's very in vogue. Right? We're seeing more and more of it. We've seen it before in some of the earlier Super Bowls, but we also know, as we've referred to a couple of times, the 70s, one of the things the 70s is known for are the big name running backs. Mm-hmm. And, which would be the centerpiece of their offense. And there's a whole bunch of them, including the guy we just talked about, Chuck Foreman. But the Raiders, no, this is by committee, and this is typical Raiders. They're a great rushing team, as we're going to see throughout this game, but it was by committee, which is great. Different way of mixing up different skill set, but it's just something that people might want to make note of, given today's discussion in today's game about running backs and central part of offense, and by committee or having multiple running backs. Yeah, this has been a theme we've seen before, and we're seeing it here in 1976.
Mm-hmm. It's Ben is like would finish with 22 yards, and it's kind of funny to say, like, what a great game he had. 22 yards, that's great. Well, it was. Yeah. And we'll get into more of that. On a play action, Stabler finds Biletnikoff, who had to come back for it, 9 yards. Would have been a first down, but Stabler wasn't quite accurate enough. We'll talk a little bit more about Biletnikoff later. Banaszak, I just put him on a pedestal, but he got a 1 yard loss here. Seaman is the one who gets that. 3rd and 2, Seaman does it again. Tackle for loss getting Davis. And they got a punt. And we finally get our first look at the first real punter. Well, yeah, I'll say it. The first real punter. Ray Guy. And when we started this with the Ice Bowl, in, what was that, 68, 69? I'm trying to remember.
66.
66, okay. All right, so 66, we're only 10 years removed. And in the 66, even the years leading after that, or well, all before it, who's your kicker? Well, who can kick the furthest? When Al Davis drafted Ray Guy in the first round, they were probably thinking, you're a lunatic. Nope. He was not. He'd later become one. But right now, it's like, well, how fast do you do the 40? That's what Davis became. But right now, he's still in genius phase. And Gowdy says right away, 2 things really interesting. Some people have called Ray Guy the best punter ever. He was only in year 4.
Yeah.
And he also said that no, he's never had a punt blocked. That'll come and play a little bit later. But
yeah, the thing about Ray Guy, which I think is mentioned as well, he booms it high and he booms it far, which is interesting because we're starting to think about punt coverage, right, and hang time. I don't think that's something, again, that we saw earlier in the Super Bowls in terms of the evolution of field position and the role punters can play, and how hang time it was and is a factor, even in some cases more important than the distance. Letting your coverage team get under and nullify a kick returner because the ball's hanging in the air longer, et cetera. That kind of strategy in the field position and the role of punting and the way the defensive focus of the NFL was at this time. The Raiders clearly saw the value, of a guy who could shift field position based on punting, and to the point where they drafted one. And, there were other sort of specialized punters, but very quickly and early on in his career, people are already recognizing Ray Guy, as the greatest punter of all time, which I think there's still a lot of debate about that, not just more modern punters, but even punters before Ray Guy. But he probably became, I think, the guy that the most casual fans, as they were learning and watching football in this era, he was the punter that, and this game was one of them on, obviously, in the Super Bowl with the national coverage and whatnot. But he's not just some guy, right? Excuse the expression. He's not just some other guy. He's Ray Guy, right? So the identity of a punter and the importance of it, and I think it comes out in the commentating, as does the flip side, but we'll save that for a little bit later.
And he's an athlete.
Yes.
Big,
tall guy with a big leg and can boom those kicks. And I don't think we had a punter, maybe there were a few exceptions, but who had all of that package, so to speak, and was brought in because the Raiders identified the key position and that what he could do. All that wrapped in we're seeing here with Ray Guy.
Well, we were talking before in previous episodes how there was no extension with the legs.
I think we pretty much trashed every other punter in Super Bowl history, right? And punting game and punting coaching and strategy and all of that. We have sort of, it wasn't really, a major focus. We kind of trashed a lot, but here we're really seeing a punter. Yeah. How we now view the game and the importance of field position and things like I mentioned, like hang time.
Yeah, well, it's shown right away. 51-yard punt. Lenny Willis can only return it for 6. So Vikings are going to start on their own 16. All right, so let's see what they can do. All right, Tarkenton throws to Foreman on a bootleg, 16 yards overall, but 11 of that was after the catch. Foreman was great here. It was like ballet watching him just dance around.
I watched this, a right spin move. You kind of go back to what I said earlier, right? You're seeing Chuck Foreman as a runner, and this is a guy who led the league in pass receptions in the 70s at one point. He's a great receiver, and you see the open field threat, right? We talk about that today's game, right? How important that is. And you see a guy here who's big, strong, can catch the ball out of a running back position, and can juke and make moves, right, and get around guys. And I saw this play and just went wow, that's Chuck Foreman.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Me too.
I would have liked to see more of it in the game, but we saw it here.
Right. Brent McClanahan gets it for 2. Foreman on the next play, he only gets 1. Villapiano had a great tackle. Third down, another drop back by Tarkenton. He's looking deep for Brown, who's in tight double coverage, and they're lucky. Willie Brown didn't intercept it. So Minnesota's got a punt. But hey, here's something that's also different. Celebrities are coming to these games now.
Yeah.
We got our first. It's Don Rickles.
Good to see, Kirk.
Don Rickles.
Yes. Your favorite all-time comedian, right?
I like Don Rickles. I mean, I can't imagine him having a career now. I liked how in our football chat group, our buddy Jeff, somehow he turns it into the Kirk Buchner celebrity roast, where I'm the victim, but that's okay. Makes fun of me because I'm Canadian. Paul's Canadian too. But he's more American now because he's lived there more. So there you go. I don't know. It's like I think I'm going to have to go on camera once, just wear that Canadian tuxedo, although I don't have a jean jacket anymore. But
so Don Rickles is in the stands. We are in LA. We're in the Rose Bowl, and
he's part of an NBC show.
Yes. So you kind of, it's funny, right? I mean, nowadays we don't even blink when we see all that cross promotion. Like I'm telling my wife, she's like, "Oh, look who's in the stands." I can tell you right now, I don't know what it is, but they either have a movie or a show
Right.
from Fox or whoever's televising the Super Bowl, and I guarantee you, all these people were they're showing in the stands or the private boxes who were celebrities, TV movie stars. There's cross promotion going on. Well, we just saw it right here
Yep.
in,
Well,
19, in 19 January 1977.
He is the star of the show CPO Sharky. That lasted 2 years. Never saw that, but whatever. Man, there's a comedian who couldn't last today, huh? How many times did he get?
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, insult comedy. I mean, even though the roast and all that kind of stuff. I mean, even though the people who are at the receiving end of it, they know what they're getting into and they laugh. It's joking on me and all, but the audience and the broader community,
some of it.
The broader community be like, he said what about who? And like, that's outrageous. You can't say that about somebody's ethnicity or their age or their gender or their political affiliations. But Rickles was this classic, right, insult comic, which it was popular well into the 70s and the 80s, and was a major celebrity for it, and would be for many, many years. But yeah, I can't envision that having kind of any kind of resonance with people today. Like they would be insulted, even though the person receiving it would get a laugh out of it and did kind of take it. Everybody else would be like, I can't believe he said that.
It was Don Rickles at that time. If he tried that now, of course he can't because he's since passed. But if anyone sort of like did that now or anything like that, either he'd get beat up or there'd be people just crying, because I can just imagine what Don Rickles would have done with the genders that exist today. I can't even imagine.
Or even the political stuff. If people want to see Don Rickles a bit later in his career, you can find it online. There was like a tribute or something for Ronald Reagan when he was president. And Don Rickles, maybe it was a birthday party or something like that, I forget. But Don Rickles was there. It was televised kind of a thing. And he starts by total reverence, Mr. President and the presidency. And then within minutes, he's dropping these one-liners. And Reagan is he's like laughing his head off, and the audience.
They're probably buddies too.
Yeah, I know, but it's all fun and games.
Yeah.
But you just realize, an outsider looking into that in today would be like, you can't say that.
Yeah. There's something I'll find it and send it to you. It's Don Rickles. Somehow he's like hanging out with the Los Angeles Dodgers in the early 80s or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think he says something to Pedro Guerrero. I might be wrong, and then he just goes like that. Just like, I might be wrong on who it was. I'll have to find it, but
he's a big celebrity in the 70s. Yeah.
He was. I mean, like every few months he'd be on Carson. That would be a big deal.
Yeah.
All right. For people under 25 not named Vinny, he was Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story. There you go.
Yes, there you go.
Anyway, Claybo's got a punt, and Colsey, I forgot, I didn't put his first name. I'll be talking about him later. Colsey can't do anything to return. Oakland 1st and 10 on their own 26. Before the first play, they show how Biletnikoff has hardly any pads and no shoulder pads. I thought that can't be right. Holy crap, it's right.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing here about player safety. It's about speed, being light, not carrying that extra weight, the ability without the shoulder pads interfere with trying to get to the ball and all of that. So yeah, you will see, especially I think the receivers is probably one of the more positions that really kind of evidence, even some of the quarterbacks, even some of the running backs. And you look closely and you realize these guys are not wearing the same kind of protection that would be very common, of course, in today's game is essential to player safety, which is. But back then, and what's interesting is, there wasn't really a lot team or I don't think league mandated. So guys were kind of putting, what they were wearing was what they wanted to wear, in the sense of like, this is how I want to gear up for what I'm trying to do, right? And if that meant smaller pads or fewer protection here or there because they needed to be leaner, faster, or whatever, then they were doing it. And so it was very much the players not, and just throwing safety out the window. Like, if I'm going to be successful, then I can't be encumbered by all this heavy protection.
I think also, too, I mean, they mentioned throughout the game how Biletnikoff is not your traditional athlete.
No, and here's the other thing. Not is he not wearing the full pads. Folks, there is no massive physical presence of a guy here who's big, strong enough. They're like, okay, he can manage to survive this game. He kind of, I don't know. We could probably think of what a comparison, but he doesn't look like. Yeah, I mean, he's a thin-built, smaller, lean kind of guy, and there were other receivers like that at this time. Kind of scruffy looking and everything. But his hands, I mean, that's what it was. He could run, he could catch the ball, and that's going to be critical. But you look at him, you're like, there's no way that guy's a starting NFL wide receiver, and a very good one in the league. If you just looked at him on the sidelines, or
just look at him on the sidelines, I'm not letting him even in my place to do plumbing.
Yeah, I mean, he's scraggly looking, thin, yeah, and to think that, yeah, and he played, we're going to get to this. He played a major role in this game. Yeah,
I think also too. I mean, like, so here's a guy again, like we said, not the most obviously athletic enough, but compared to everyone around him, he's probably one of the slowest, probably one of the weakest in terms of benching or anything in the gym. So he's doing what he can with what he's got, which basically means I still need an extra step just to even get there, which is why he's not wearing the pads. He's also, here's something I didn't know, because I always associated Stickum with Lester Hayes.
Right.
Lester Hayes rule. I did not know that this was Biletnikoff.
Yep.
And so they mentioned that here. So, I mean, here's a guy who's crafty. And like you said, it's all about the hands. And North Dallas 40, I guess he's Nick Nolte.
Yes. Yep, that's kind of how that's played off, and that's
taller.
Yep. That's what you're seeing here. But you're right. I mean, he did what he needed to do in terms of what he had to work with and what advantage he could squeak out of, whether it's the rules or the equipment or whatever. And the whole thing was I just need to find a seam. I need to get open. I'm not as great as an athlete, because defensive players are getting more and more athletic. We're seeing that. And of course, nowadays game, it's almost equal in terms of pure talent, athletic skill on either side of the ball. Mm-hmm. And here he's just got to find a way to work. And I think there was a comment made somewhere in the game that, we hear this time and time again, quarterbacks working with receivers on timing. And so, at some point, I think maybe Meredith said they've run that play 100 times in the offseason. I mean, or something like that effect, or they've thrown he's caught hundreds of passes from Stabler in the season preparing for this. Yeah. And that's what it was. Yeah. Kind of the figuring out the routes and what he could do, and Stabler having the confidence that, if he gets open, he's going to catch this ball.
Absolutely.
That's not going to be what it is. Yeah.
Although we're not doing that here. We just went on there. I was amazed by that. Blew my mind. Van Eegen rushes for 3. And let's see. Also, that's where Gowdy mentioned how Stabler and Jones were the only 2 players to get over 100 passer rating. So they were actually the first to do it. And I checked to see how many people did it in 2022. So it was 6.
Yeah.
So, which is still a high bar, but
it's pretty phenomenal that there were 2 of them in 1976 and are in this game. Yeah, it's pretty. I would not have, if you just asked me, I'm like, no, we're not quite seeing a lot of quarterbacks hitting that level. And they weren't a lot. But even 2 and have both in the game is quite revealing on how slowly the passing game, right, is evolving. Slowly.
Well, luck is actually working on the side of Minnesota. Stabler throws, and it's almost intercepted by Jeff Wright, who cut in front of the aforementioned Biletnikoff. Okay, that doesn't seem as lucky, but Davis rushes outside the left. Looked good, but it's only 5. Ray Guy's got a punt. It was a jinx by Gowdy, because for the first time ever, Ray Guy's punt was blocked.
Yes.
Gowdy also mentioned, though, it's almost, if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Minnesota, because they blocked 16 kicks overall this season. Just great storytelling. It's almost like he knew what was going to happen. Obviously, he didn't, but it's still amazing. The replay shows that Fred McNeil got the block, and also Ray Guy is the one who got the tackle.
Yeah.
So again, he didn't just stand there like, what? and I
no, yeah. I guess today, yeah, maybe a punter might step back and let the other guys be a little more, but at this point, yeah, he's the guy there, and kudos to him. Yeah, jumping in. Yeah, I mean, jumps in there and at least stops from a return for a touchdown right off the bat there.
Yeah. Well, it turned out he saved the touchdown.
Yeah.
Because Minnesota's got first and goal on the 3, and Foreman, as expected, he's going to get the ball, but he only gets 1. So they're going to try to switch it up with McClanahan on second down. He fumbles. Oakland recovers. We don't really get to see they only showed that play once, but it's Willie Hall who gets the recovery and what has to be the biggest play of his life. The replay shows that it's Villapiano who broke it loose, but Hall was there, did what he had to do. And if I'm a Viking fan, I'm saying me.
Yeah, because we know it's going to be a close game. We know there's good matchups here. But yeah, we've pointed this out, and we're big football fans. You see this a lot in the game: momentum, opportunity lost right here. It's early in the game, but you have you've just gotten the ball back, with that block punt, and this is a great opportunity for a team recover it deep in the red zone, as we call it today, and punch it in and establish a lead, right, and make a game. And here we are, and yet the ball gets turned back over, and you wonder, given how this game's about to play out, how important of a hinge flip point this was in the game, where things actually ended up going from here on in. What could have been different? Maybe not, but certainly it would have changed the momentum and tone a little bit different if the Vikings were to punch this in when they had this great opportunity. Because we're all fans, and like if your team gets the ball in a situation like this with a quick turnover and you're right at the end zone, you want 7.
Even if you're a fan of a team that's not very good and this happens, you
gotta take advantage of these opportunities to be in the game, to stay in the game, to get the points when you can in case it's close later, right? All of that means you got a great opportunity, you got to cash it in. And if you're a fan, you're nothing more frustrated at seeing an opportunity lost, and this is a big one right here.
Yeah. But you feel a little bit okay the first 2 plays because it's Banaszak rushing for 2, then 1. They're just trying to get a bit of breathing room. You're almost thinking, well, maybe they're just thinking Guy's not going to, because it's probably not going to happen twice. But they don't have to worry about that. Davis gets it next, cuts to the left for, I think this is the best rush of the game.
Yeah.
A 35-yard rush. Oakland's got first and 10 on their own 41. Stabler throws on first down. He's got Carl Garrett, who we talked about earlier, midfield for an 11-yard gain. Now we're in Minnesota territory. Biletnikoff. Didn't quite, not yet, but goes deep for him, double teamed, incomplete.
Well, we see what the Raiders are trying to do, right? Yep. We can see it. You can see what they're trying to do. It hasn't worked yet, but we can kind of see the offense that they're running and how they're built, and we can see their game plan. Not everything's clicked in terms of big plays, a few good runs, but we can see, and I'm sure the Vikings, right, are seeing the same thing as we are, what the Raiders are trying to do. It just hasn't worked yet, but you can think, okay, the Raiders, if they keep on this, they're gonna hit some big plays here. It's gonna fall into place because you know what their strategy is and what they're taking advantage of their talent or the matchups. We know what they're trying to do. It just hasn't quite worked yet.
We're getting there, though.
We're getting there.
Yeah. Second and 10, Stabler finds Casper for a 25-yard gain. Casper was 15 yards after catch, and that was all through just power. There had been like 7 people, maybe I'm exaggerating, who at least touched him at one point. And we got another first down. Raiders go back to the ground for the next 3 plays. Van Egan for 5, Davis for 4, and Banaszak with his best rush for 6. During that series, they also showed another celebrity. That would be your fellow Ohio. Well, was he an Ohio native? Ohioan at this point. That's World Series MVP Johnny Bench.
Yes.
Huh.
Mr. Bench makes an appearance.
Absolutely.
Big Red Machine. Apparently, they're out in LA enjoying the Super Bowl. Easy is.
Oh,
Probably was there to film a commercial, right?
he was getting quite a lot of commercials. Who was getting
Yeah,
more?
he's one of these athletes in the 70s, right? Who had that perfect image for being I was taught earlier, right, to be the brand, the face of a brand. And so who knows? He was out maybe filming a commercial or two and got invited and in the stands to watch the Super Bowl.
It also shows just how it's getting bigger. I mean, is Paul and I were not sort of like into like looking at celebrities. Like I think maybe I'm speaking for you here, but I think if we were like to come across a celebrity, it's like we probably wouldn't even bother to try to go up to them just to give them their space. But it is a big deal for a lot of people, especially as we're watching it become more and more and more pop culture. And we're seeing that with every year. Whatever bench commercial he did do, at least he was smart enough not to do what Pete Rose did and do commercials in his damn underwear that nobody wanted to see. God damn it. What the?
Well, I think when it came to Pete Rose, you wave a few $100 bills in front of him. Johnny may be thinking a little bigger picture, longer term. I don't know. But
Pete Rose, all right. He's getting that 300. Okay, I can use that to bet on.
Well, yeah, and when it comes to celebrities, we mentioned this, right? We're in LA, we're in the Rose Bowl. Over 100,000 people, right? I
forgot to mention that.
Attendance. So we talked about this. The Rose Bowl was going to go on to hold the number of games in the 70s and actually into the early 90s. And to this day, those Super Bowls still rank among the top attendance. So this is over 100,000 people in LA, and so we're starting to see the celebrity kind of angle play out. This is not the first. The game has been in the LA Coliseum before in earlier Super Bowls, but I think the Rose Bowl kind of brings it up to a level and that we had not quite seen before. And the Rose Bowl was, of course, really only known at this time for the big game that it hosted, not that it was hosting college and pro teams regularly. But it kind of showcased, but the LA flavor and the celebrity part of it, we start to see more of.
That's day game or game fully competed during the day, during daylight. I read too.
Yeah.
So it's end of quarter. So we're going to start off the second quarter, first and goal on the 8. As we come back from break, we got some more celebrities. It's O.J. Simpson and Franco Harris. Gowdy says, how would you like them both in your backfield? Of course you would, which is great as long as you're not having sex with one of the separated wives, because that might not go well, especially if you're a waiter.
Yeah. Let's not spend too much time talking about
That's all I wanted to say.
But yeah, a little interesting cultural celebrity NFL highlight there. Two different guys, but two big names, right? Yeah.
You can't not notice anything with OJ without 1,000 thoughts coming through your head. It's impossible.
Yeah, and not only, he was a great football player in college, in this area in LA, and of course in the pros, and was a major celebrity in the 70s and well into that, and so he was. He's not at his peak in terms of fame, but he's kind of ascending, right, as a celebrity coming out of the NFL that a lot of casual fans and people who follow TV, movies, and commercials and all that, they knew who O.J. Simpson was.
Did he already have his 2,000-yard year? I think, right?
Yeah, that was earlier in the 70s.
That's what I thought. Okay.
I think he's kind of peak or maybe edging a little bit past peak as a player, but he's still mentioned as one of the top running backs in the NFL, which is fair enough. And he's prepping for that. Okay, let me be careful here. He's prepping for that post-playing career as a celebrity TV movie kind of commercial.
Why wouldn't he? He's got that $1 million smile, right?
Yep.
He's marketing gold.
Yep. And there he is. Enough about OJ.
Banaszak gets the first play. It's only one. Stabler's pass is caught by Casper, but it's out of bounds at the end zone. Tries it again, but overthrows might not have worked anyway because there was a lot of pressure by Eller. And based on what Don Meredith's commentary, we didn't see it. He said that Cliff Branch was open. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Um,
I think they went back and did a replay.
Yeah, I missed that.
Yeah, but you still couldn't tell. The replay was really so focused so much on Stabler looking down the middle and then looking to his right. You never see. You have to sort of take the announcers on good faith. That I think they mentioned, that the Stabler was rushed. He sort of stepped up into the pocket. Didn't really blame him for not seeing the open receiver, but they did mention that. But we couldn't really see it. But again, it happens. I mean, I don't think anybody was blaming Stabler for the fact that he just couldn't get the ball to him or didn't maybe see him.
He's doing his job as an analyst.
Yeah. So
man comes in to kick. It's good, 24 yards. Oakland scores first, 3-0. Ray Guy kicks off. It's interesting. He's doing the kickoffs also too. Willis returns it to the 26, and so we're first down there for Minnesota. Tarkenton throws a 20-yard pass, but it's incomplete to Sammy White. It'd be a while before he got going. A drop play to Foreman gets 6. They go to Foreman again, but they stuff him on for no gain on a reverse. So they saw that all the way coming.
Yeah, the Vikings just really aren't. They're not putting the plays together right. They're not getting the first down. They're not sustaining drives. It's kind of they had that one opportunity after the punt was blocked, but they're not really moving down the field. They're struggling maintaining that consistency, right? And they're leaning up against a great defense, and they have the pieces there, but they're just, I don't know, just not really. I want to say sluggish, but it's just not really falling all together for them yet, and they're struggling, and they're giving the ball back, and giving the Raiders more and more opportunities to do what we see they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Claybo punts, it's not a great one, only 32 yards, and Oakland will begin on their own 36. Stabler throws a quick pass to Cliff Branch, eventual Hall of Famer, but we didn't see much of that here. It was a quiet day. I think he only had 30 yards overall.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. I mean, I knew he didn't have a huge game here, and he's not the only receiver from this era who didn't play great enough in Super Bowls or playoffs. It probably was a factor in a long time getting in the Hall of Fame. Drew Pearson's another guy like that. A lot of great catches in the 70s and maybe all-decade team, but didn't play necessarily. I think when he had the one catch in the previous Super Bowl we covered. But, I was kind of surprised a little bit that they didn't go to Branch more and that he didn't get a few more receptions, and could be a lot of different reasons for that. We don't see much of him, which is kind of surprising. Although I think Branch's peak career would come a bit later than this game in the late 70s and in the early 80s. But I was a bit surprised, I guess, in retrospect, that he didn't really play a big factor.
I guess if you're predominantly a passing team, though, and rushing's working, go with what's working.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I didn't mean to say it anyway with as a criticism.
No, that wasn't shot at Branch at all.
Yeah, but you're right. You're right. And as we see this game as it plays out, the passing game was either an outlet in terms of Casper, or they go big and they go deep. But most of what they're trying to do here is run the ball and mix in the pass. And you're probably right that Branch wasn't seen as much or didn't have as much of a big role because that wasn't the game plan.
So it's an 8-yard pass, and after the play, I saw this visual. It's like there's Art Shell helping Branch up. It looks like it's a giant picking up a toddler, and it's small. Shell is just a mountain.
Well, and this is the other thing we probably should have pointed out with the Raiders' offensive line. For the era and the time they played, these were big guys. Now, offensive line has changed a lot. The guys are massive that we see on the field today. But my recollection of guys like Art Shell and Gene Upshaw, one of the unique sort of characteristics of them as offensive linemen, they were big and they were tough, but they were big guys. And which was kind of counter. Again, the evolution is still moving on offensive line play here in terms of big guys. But for their era, and then you stand them side by side with a receiver who most often are smaller, as we know, in most offensive line. It's kind of startling to see. But part of that is these were big offensive linemen, and Shell was a big guy for his era.
Just love some of these visuals. Raiders got 1st and 10 on the 47. oh, we've got another celebrity. I got thrown off as a football
It's
fan.
okay. It's cool though. We're in LA.
Yeah, but I mean, thrown off by this celebrity. It's Ken Norton. It's like, wait a minute, Ken Norton couldn't have been alive because I'm thinking of the football player. It's a big football first before boxing, but that's also the era where Ali was God, but if you were a top contender, we knew who you were.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and boxing has a long history, and in many respects, even through the 70s, right, was still seen as a top, what, 3, 4th pro sport in the United States. It probably at a level in many across the country, in many markets, better than hockey. So you had NFL, the Major League Baseball,
basketball too.
NBA was becoming more and more widespread and popular. But boxing is right up there in terms of coverage and major heavyweight fights, and of course, great characters and boxers. Of course, led by the wonderful and fantastic Muhammad Ali, but his fights against guys and guys like Ken Norton and George Foreman and others. Boxing was a big deal in terms of a big professional sport. We don't see it today, and it still was in the 70s, and major fights on network TV, and it was a big deal. So boxers were huge celebrities. Yeah,
I can't even tell you right now who the heavyweight champion is because Tyson Fury retired, right? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, I have no, and it's all changed. Mixed martial fighting and all this other stuff is all in there. It's all, but pure, if we want to call it pure traditional boxing, it's not. I mean, it still exists today, but it doesn't. It's not at the level of the American psyche as a major sport to watch in especially on TV, network TV, heavyweight bouts, like it was for much of that whole century, all the way well in the 1970s, but going back 20s, 30s, 40s, and the 50s and on, right? It's still there. It kind of started to fade out, by the 80s, and then we have Mike Tyson and some others that kind of bring it back a bit, but these guys were huge celebrities.
Also, I think when you don't even know what the WBA, WBO, IBF, WBO.
Yeah.
It's hard to. I mean, they will market now big fights. It's name versus name, and the title doesn't even matter anymore. And that's not even on heavyweight division.
Yeah,
which is again another thing that I never would have bought when I was a teenager. You said no, that would never happen. Bigger is better.
Yeah.
There we go. On this drive, Davis on a reverse. He dances, does well. 6-yard gain. Next play, Stable drops back. We got gets Branch in tight coverage. It's only 2. 3rd and 2. It's beautiful play action, and Casper gets wide open, and it's another great yard after catch, a 19-yard gain. 1st and 10 on the Minnesota 26. Casper's another guy who could have been possibly the Super Bowl MVP here.
Yep. We can already tell by this early. Well, we're still pretty much early in the game. That he's come up. His name's come up. He's had some big plays.
Yeah. Well, we got Carl Garrett. He's getting his turn here because the next 3 plays are about him. Gets a phenomenal run, juking defenders for his best run of the game, 13 yards. They're on 1st and 10 on the Minnesota 13. Garrett rushes for 4, tackled by Seaman. All right. I wrote this down. I'll say it anyway. The 12-year-old Kirk Buchner laughed when in consecutive lines he said, "It's all Seaman, and here comes Seaman." I'm 50 going on 12, Paul. I don't know what to say. I think maybe
that's all right.
I don't have kids, so that part of me just never completely went away.
And the thing is, in this game, you have to say that a lot. He had 15 tackles in this game.
Yes. So there was a lot.
You can't avoid. You're not going to avoid having to mention it.
Yes. All right. After this, it's 3rd and 3 on the Minnesota 6.
Unless from here on in, you might want to just call him Jeff.
Yeah. Well, our friend the Schlegel Daddy will get confused if he's watching this.
True. Yeah.
You can follow him at the Schlegel Daddy. He's very entertaining.
Yeah.
Stabler throws to Biletnikoff near the end zone sideline at the one. It all like if you just threw it a little differently, that could have been a touchdown right there, but whatever. After that catch, actually, they're showing Madden. Madden's just such a character. So many shots on Madden. Uh, I loved everything about watching him. Uh, then they showed a picture. Oh, so we were talking about how they did the circle pictures of all the front line or well, they did just headshots of just in a circle. They showed Biletnikoff. That was the first time they just sort of showed that circle, just circle image, and just the guy. And there's Biletnikoff, and like that's 34. Yeah.
Yeah. It is crazy when you look back at well, people generally, right, but also, we associate a lot memory with faces of celebrities and athletes. And you look at me like, how old is that guy? You realize, I don't know, Kurt, you realize a couple things, right? Is that smoking's not good for you. Because at 30, you look 20 years older.
Mm-hmm.
So smoking's a part of it. Probably too much sun exposure, whatever. And okay, I'm going to tread into some careful ground here, Kurt. So I don't want to put you on spot here, but you don't
Drinking.
want to drink. You don't want to drink too much. A lot of drinking, a lot of smoking, and a lot of sun, and you're going to look.
1 for 3.
But you look young for your age. But back in the '70s, these guys, not just the '70s, but people know this, right? You look at, wow, how old were they?
I'm mostly sober on all of these shows.
Yeah, well, but that's a bonus.
Yes, and I didn't even.
But he looks like. I guess maybe we shouldn't make too much fun of the guy, but boy, man, yeah, he looks. I would say ragged around the edges. He looks a little scruffy, a little rough. I mean, what's going on there? But he's a great player.
Oh, for sure.
Man, yeah, he looks a lot older.
He does. Well, we didn't even get a shot of Bob Kuchenberg without his helmet when we were doing all the Dolphins ones. There's that one iconic one. Like you just think, how are you playing? But it's just different.
Yeah,
different time. First and goal on the one, and we got a perfect play. Play action. Casper's all alone. They weren't looking for him. They didn't see him at all. Point after good. Oakland 10-0. Damn. They were not expecting that. That's what the third Casper catch in a row, where they were not expecting him at all.
Yeah, and which is kind of odd. I mean, it wasn't like he was unknown. He was a threat, but however they were playing or whatever whatever the strategy of the Vikings or the matchup personnel, it wasn't in their favor. And we're starting to see what the Raiders are doing, and it's starting to work. And they're sustaining these drives. They're getting these first downs. They're moving the ball down the field. They're hitting some key plays, and we get a little bit of a hint of dominance starting to show up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's early. Oh, it's early, but you can kind of feel it.
You do. I mean, things change so much at halftime, but it's when the O-line's clicking that good, and then you're piling up against that, and then doesn't matter, we're going to beat you this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, the counter to that, if you're a Vikings fan, or in this case on the field or the coaches, you begin to realize we need to start. Mm-hmm. We need to start doing some things. We need to get in the game. We need to start competing, if you want to use that expression. I mean, I don't mean I didn't mean to say that the Raiders weren't, or the Vikings weren't competing. What I meant was they really need to raise that level of play. They need to start getting in the game. They need to make a game of this.
And they've got the time to do it.
Yeah, you got the time, but you can kind of see there's no panic here yet, but I think you can see we need to get something going here because we are falling behind and we can't stop the Raiders. And if that's the case, we need to get in the game so we can make a game of it and keep pace with it. We're not doing that. We need to start getting in this game in the sense of moving the ball and getting some points, because it's getting away from us a little bit if we're not careful here.
Yeah. Well, they're sticking with what they know. First down on the 25. Foreman rushes for 7. That play is sort of interesting, and again, interesting in a way that if it was today, we'd see like 8 different angles.
Yep.
So Foreman gets it again. After 5 yards, he fumbles, and it looks like initially, I thought that Oakland recovered it. One of the refs sure thought so because he signaled that. That's in real time. That's how it looked to me. Meredith saw it differently, and he was the person who was right. Said Minnesota had it. They didn't really show that, so I kind of wish I could. There was more angles of that, but so be it. What are you going to do? The holding penalty on Minnesota. We didn't have a lot of penalties, thank God. I hate talking about penalties.
Yeah, and we hate to see games where penalties become a factor. Whether they're deserving penalties or not, it does it takes away from the flow of the game, and it kind of makes it a bit. And I think we've been pretty good. I mean, the Super Bowls we've seen, we've been a couple of sloppy games, a lot of turnovers. But I was thinking, we talked about a few of these games that there were a relatively small number of penalties, which makes you wonder, well, were there not penalties or whether they were just letting the guys play, as the expression goes. I think it's
all that too.
Both. But yeah, it certainly helps the flow of the game and keeps things moving, and it doesn't kind of create overt advantages for a team where a penalty helps them in a big way in terms of either stop on defense or an offense movement. So it takes away from sort of the significance of how penalties can really impact the game, positive and negative, depending on the timing and who's penalized. So it's kind of nice to see that the game isn't kind of overtrodden with a whole bunch of penalties and all that issue. Yeah.
Well, with the fumble or fumble recovery that was, and then this penalty, it's 2nd and 13. We see Tarkenton scrambling. They mentioned that he wasn't much of a scrambler anymore, which is fine. Sees Sammy White, throws a little low, and it's incomplete. 3rd and 13, another drop back. Now he's got protection. He's got Ahmad Rashad. Rashad has got Tatum beat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would have been a first down probably in the Oakland 37. Okay, there's another gut punch. Rashad would eventually have, I think his 4 Pro Bowls came after. Is he still married to Felicia Arizona? Like the Mrs. Huxtable? I'm not going to do a Bill Cosby joke. I'm not.
Yeah,
but
thank you. We all know. This was a natural segue. I thought you were going to go with it.
Nope.
Really. I think they still are, but and I think he's one of these guys who had a pretty good career, but I think he became a lot more famous, right? Because he got into media, sports media and stuff.
Well, he had a great speaking voice and TV face.
And then his wife became a major celebrity in the 80s and 90s. So.
Well, did they get married though? Because if I remember right, and it's everything I've got not to do with Bill Cosby jokes, so I'm trying really hard.
We all appreciate that.
Glenn just lets me go. That's not always a good thing. But yeah, I think in the first season she was billed as Felicia Arizona. But
yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're right.
Whatever. But yeah, it's a gut punch. This is just, and I'm sure Rashad was kicking himself. He would get some receptions later, but man,
we just talked about this, right? The Vikings need something, right?
Mm-hmm. And they had it, and
even a sustained drive would have helped. Even some successful plays in a row to kind of get the momentum, kind of get themselves moving. But points would be great, field position. But it's just not happening for them, and it's got to be frustrating.
Well, Claypool's there to punt. It's a great return by Colsey. He gets it into Minnesota territory, so we got 1st and 10 on the Vikings 35. Davis rushes for 5, Van Egan then for 3, and on 3rd down they stay rushing, and why not? This is working. Van Egan they carve a nice hole. He gets 8, 1st and 10 on the 18. First down pass again to the Scarecrow. Biletnikoff right in the middle of a post, about as close as you can get to a touchdown. Stabler thought they had it, and on the you can see how hyper focused Biletnikoff was. He's gonna get tackled. He's got someone else coming on him. We would have at least saw multiple replays to see if he broke the plane, but we got none of that.
Yeah, and here, this is his second time already in the game, right?
Yep.
With a good key catch that got the Raiders within the 1 yard line that could. I didn't look both plays close enough to figure out, like you say, if we would have seen more, if the refs would have stopped and thought about, did the ball, because in this era, that ball just needs to cross the plane, and it was close. But it's just interesting, two big catches, and both of the result was the Raiders, within the 1 yard line. So he's making some big plays. It could have easily been 2 touchdowns.
Oh, yeah.
Or that close in both cases. Kind of fascinating. And he's not done yet.
No, he's not. So on the 1 foot line, Vanacek makes it look so easy. Touchdown. The only good thing that's going right now for Minnesota is that the kicking, sometimes you're having a little bit of issues because man shanks this one. Pretty bad. 16-0 Oakland.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing the kicking game. We're seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly here, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, extra points weren't 100% like close to are today. Even if they changed the rules to make it a little bit harder, but yeah, the kicking game, and this is not the first time in the Super Bowl, we've seen kind of this chaotic, miss, kick a good field goal. And we've seen this before in the Super Bowls, but yeah, if you're a Vikings fan, there's very little to take away from where we are at this point in the game, and after that dry, except for the fact that it's only 16-0 and not 17-0, but that feeling we talked about a few minutes ago, right? If you're a Viking fan or a Viking player, it's not getting any better.
It is not. Back from, I guess, their break, got another celebrity. It's famed asshole, Chevy Chase. And if you think I'm kidding, just Google Chevy Chase.
Yeah. I think most of our audience probably realizes that. And hey, folks, he was a celebrity in 1976. Do the math on that.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the other guys we've talked about would go on to be celebrities for a while yet, but I think maybe this is one of the first ones who was a celebrity enough to be highlighted at a Super Bowl in January 1977, and who today, most people, love him or hate him, would still call a celebrity. And
I'd
yet,
for me, both.
Decades later, right? It's crazy.
He knew the camera was on him, and he played to it. Good on him.
Yeah.
Chevy, still love you in the original Vacation and in Community. I wish you didn't have hated when you left that show. Anyway.
Yep.
On the Ray Guy kickoff, the Vikings are trying something a little bit different. So they're bringing Sammy White to take that, like they're trying to find a spark. They didn't find it here. Minnesota 1st and 10 on the 25. Tarkenton passes to Foreman on a sideline route. Good for 5. They flash a staggering stat. Oakland 44, Minnesota 16 in number of plays.
Yeah.
It would even up a little bit more. Actually, I was amazed that Oakland only had 2 more first downs than Minnesota, but I think a lot of that was just from that garbage. Well, 4 of it was from that garbage run that they allowed to happen.
Yep.
And just from that one where they did get the touchdown eventually, where 3 of them, was it 2 I think were from penalties. So, and it's not, that stat does not tell that story, that's for sure. Foreman rushes for 3 on 3rd and 2. They give it back to Foreman. Cuts back, jukes for a hard-fought 7. Minnesota 1st and 10 on the 40. A little bit of a break as Oakland's penalized for 5 yards, automatic first down. So it would have been a 5-yard completion anyway, but now you get your first down instead of 2nd and 5. All right, Rashad catches, so he gets 7. That was Tarkenton's first completion to someone other than Chuck Foreman.
Yeah. It's I mean, part of it is the play calling and the strategy, but that they are they're 16 points behind the game. They're going to have to do something, and they're quickly reaching a point where Tarkenton and the passing game is gonna have to step up. But we're going to see a couple plays here where I think we would maybe wonder well, what's going on? And well, go ahead. But yeah, they've got to start doing something different. There's still time left, but Raiders are really running the ball, and I think they end up sending a first half record for most touching yards in a Super Bowl, rushing yards, and that will continue the game. But they're not giving, and the Vikings aren't getting any breaks.
No. And they're trying. They're trying. I mean, they're going to White. He just couldn't hang on as Tatum drilled him from behind. 3rd and 3, and tries White again, but this time going deep.
Skip. Yeah, and I guess I wonder at this point. Foreman has had some success. What are you doing on 2nd and 3rd and 3rd and 3, and you're passing it both times? The second one was a deep pass, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't they just trying to establish a running game, right? Get a first down, move the ball. They're closing in on 2 minutes left, but they got time. They're on the Raiders after that Rashad catch. They're on the Raiders side of the field. Mm-hmm. So there's some good positives here, and yet 2nd and 3rd, 3rd and 3, they try the pass, unsuccessful, and they got a punt. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not very encouraging.
Oh, God.
Given what they really needed to get in the game. And yeah, maybe we could second guess whether they needed one of those, maybe should have been a run to get the first down. And yeah.
As much as we can all play Monday morning quarterback, nobody plays that more than the actual coaches themselves.
Yeah.
Minnesota's got to punt it again. The Raiders don't even have to try to field it, or they don't try to. It's 1st and 10 on their own 6, and they're just trying to run out this. And they're playing conservative, but they're still gaining. Van Egan gets the first carry, gets 11. Again, the O-line is just – and they're doing this against that celebrated front four.
Although I think we're looking at a celebrated front four, which is aging out a little bit.
And we're seeing that a lot.
Yeah, and there's still some players there, but these guys, Alan Page isn't what he was, they're not.
Some bursts.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alan Page had his moments, but he was good for moments. He wasn't good for, and it gets to us all.
Yeah.
Oakland's got 1st and 10 on their own 17, and they're doing exactly what they should do. Van Egan you're just trying to eat time, gains 2, doesn't gain anything. Davis for 3. So Oakland's got a punt. And again, it's another good punt. 1st and 10 on their own 22. I don't even know how much time they have left. It's not a whole lot, but it's 1st and 10 on their 22 because of the clipping penalty, which took it back. So, there's only 7 seconds left. So they pretty much let them throw to Foreman for 25 yards, playing prevent and a half. 16-0. It's all Oakland, but it's still Minnesota. I mean, I think maybe back then, and maybe you'd have a different opinion on this, Paul, I don't know. Because we see so much more high-octane offense, I never feel, and I'm sure you as a Cowboys fan, me as a Saints fan, despite whoever quarterback we have, it's like, well, you never feel you're out of it.
Yeah.
There, I think you feel more in dire straits than you and I would right now. Correct, you think?
Oh, yeah, I think that's a perfect assessment of what we're looking at here in the time frame we've got. That, down 16-0 at halftime isn't insurmountable, but unlike today's game, it's not going to be quite as easy. And I think the other daunting issue that the Vikings are facing at halftime isn't just the score, but whatever the Raiders' plan was on offense and on defense to come in the game is working. Mm-hmm. Right. They're doing everything. I wouldn't say they're getting lucky breaks. I don't think I've seen that, but they're doing what they're doing and what they're successful at. The matchups, the game planning, the play calling, it's all working. It got a little sluggish, as we mentioned earlier. They tried, but then you can start seeing them hit, and it's working for them. Hence the score. I think if you look on the other side of the Vikings, where are we at halftime? Well, we're down 16-0. We're giving up a ton of yardage against the run, so that ain't gonna help us. We gotta, you can't get back in the game if the Raiders continue to do that. And then you're looking at, well, what are we doing on offense? And it's like, it ain't working. We're just not clicking on all cylinders. Foreman's got a few things here. We're hitting a few passes, but It ain't all there, and
We're seeing
we
less
need to do something. Yeah, we need to flip the coin, as the expression goes, in the second half here, and probably pretty quickly.
We're also
Or
seeing the difference too. Like I think we were talking about like weapons, right? You've got, I mean, obviously, Foreman. I think if you go into this game, you're thinking, who's the most dynamic offensive weapon? It's either Biletnikoff or Foreman. I guess dynamic, it'd still be Foreman because he can do more, right? But we're also seeing a difference in just tight end play.
yeah.
Casper, but nothing against Voigt, but Voigt's no Casper.
And we've seen Super Bowls, we've talked about that, there was clearly a bit of a dominance, but some of these, the Steelers games we looked at, obviously Super Bowl 10 we talked about was a classic matchup. We've seen some of the earlier Super Bowls were kind of blowouts. But we're in a game here where the feeling at halftime is the game is getting away really quickly from the Vikings. And I don't think that's something that we'd seen in the last few Super Bowls that we covered. Yeah. Even that dominant Miami game, the perfect season, right? That game, wasn't a huge advantage. I mean, the score was low enough. We kind of, all those games, I think at halftime, we would have said, listen, there's a team that's dominating maybe and ahead, but I don't think we had the same sense that it's going to be really, really tough and harder. The momentum is all on one side. I think in this game, when we got to halftime, I'm like, I don't know, the Vikings are in a rough time coming back from that. I didn't really feel that, granted, you think, okay, a big play here or there, right, a key turnover, the back in the game. Yeah, I get all that. We know that. Mm-hmm. But I think this is one of the first games that we've covered where at halftime we're like, I don't know what. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen, right? The Raiders got to fall apart, fumble, not play as well. What's working ain't working all of a sudden. I don't think all that's going to happen. And the Vikings really need to flip the coin right and turn the switch on or whatever and do a lot better. And all that has to work for them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't look. I mean, you kind of feel like, oh, this second half is just, the Raiders just going to roll over the Vikings. You kind of feel that way. Yeah. Even though, 16 points.
Yeah. But now here's the real question.
There we go.
Time show, because we watched it. We found that. Disney presents It's a Small World worse than Up with People.
Oh, it's got to be close. I mean, we're talking MICKEY, MOUSE. You've got Disney promotion for Disneyland, not far from this venue. We got It's a Small World. We got Mickey Mouse. Kirk, we got the Mouseketeers.
Well, it's because you talked about cross promotion, right?
Yeah, I mean,
it's the brand
Disney's promoting Disneyland. I don't think we've ever seen a halftime that much promotion, but
they're also promoting their show.
This is Disney in the 70s. I went to Disney in the 70s as a kid. I took my kids. I get all that. It's fine, whatever. I don't have any huge issues with it. But when you look back at this, and again, I mean, the only context we have is, darn it, Kirk, this is a halftime of the Super Bowl. We should be seeing, like a fantastic. Okay, so
if it was modern thinking, we would have had Donna Summer there.
Yeah. I mean, but we ain't getting that. We're getting Disney paid for a commercial.
Well, NBC,
dancing
and to be fair, NBC was also promoting the new Mickey Mouse Club.
Oh, yeah.
So back to your cross-promotion thing earlier.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into too much. This was all crap. I'll leave it at that. I did write down that I have no will to live. But I did notice that we did meet the new Mouseketeers. One of them did become a star.
I know. Compared to Musketeers from decades before, and even Musketeers who come later, this group, I'm like looking through that going,
well, there's one. People. One of them did make it.
Oh, who did I miss?
Lisa Whelchel. She would play Blair in Facts of Life.
Oh, good for you. I didn't. I must have misread over that. I was so. I'm honest with you, Kurt. I spent most of that laughing, thinking about what your view of this is going to be.
Well, I can. You know what?
The thing is, I don't think it's as bad as Up with the sorry,
With people.
Yeah, I think those were a lot worse. I just think this is bad in the sense of just like it's very 70-ish kind of thing.
Yeah.
And compared to today's and how they approach the halftime, it looks kind of ridiculous and really kind of like the overwhelming. I mean, I think we kind of expect cross promotional events, marketing, all that around the Super Bowl. And I think in this case, it was there and people sort of accepted, but it's sort of like funny kind of, it's kind of like it's there, but it's not. It just made me laugh. I don't think it's terrible in terms of its performance or how it all played out. It is what it is, variety, kind of singing, dancing, highlighting all of that. But it's bad. Not as bad as some of the others. I just thought, oh boy, here we go. Halftime of Super Bowl, 70s. What are we going to get? M-I-C-K-E-Y, M-O-U-S-E.
I did get inspired because one of the songs that they used, I'm going to make my co-hosts on another show do on How the Hell Was This a Hit?
There you go. For you got a little nugget of gold you can run with.
Because they did Una Paloma Blanca.
Yes.
Which was not an original hit. So I thought.
I did watch all of this, but I laughed the whole thing thinking about
what I'm going to say.
What is Kirk going to say?
Okay. Well, all right. I have my notes if you really want to go here.
Well, we'll be real quick with it for our viewers. Just give us the highlights.
All right. Well, okay.
Of your view, not that.
No, I don't know. I'm just going to. Now, I will say that part of the other things that you just can't do anymore, it really is a small world, as they just have a bunch of people walking by and cosplaying in other countries' garb. I think somebody was actually dressed like a ninja. Yeah. I guess that's supposed to be what Japanese people are.
There's a lot to unpack here. It really is. But you just sort of have to go with it, kind of chuckle and laugh. But there's a lot of things going on here. Like, okay, you were trying to promote, but maybe not the greatest promotion. And how, and the promotion value, pretty low. the amount of money I think put in, maybe it was for all the but kind of like today's, it was sort of like on the cheap and fly, but which is fine, whatever. But
the cult, it felt like a cult.
Yeah.
People. So it's like
it's there's a lot of nuances and it's there's a cringe factor.
Oh God, yeah.
But it's hilarious.
Oh God, it was. All right, start of the third quarter. Ray Guy kicks off, and White's can continue with the returning. First and 10 on the 23. Staying on the ground. Foreman rushes for 3, and on 2nd and 7, Tarkenton goes deep for White, and White again comes empty. But at this point, he hasn't got a catch yet. Yeah. That wasn't so much his fault. Thomas was phenomenal in this game, and we would see briefly how important he was when he was out. Thomas deflected that incomplete. 3rd and 7, they get here's somebody new in this game. They're trying something new. Robert Miller comes in. He's in his second year. Gets the catch from Tarkenton out of the backfield, and it's an 11-yard gain. All right, so something different. 1st and 10 on the own 39. For the first time, White gets a gain, but it's on a rush. It's a reverse for 7 yards. Feels like every time we see these reverses, they never work. The games we're watching. I don't know why that is. But yeah, White had an interesting career. His first 2 years were really good, and then he was just average. But 6,400 yards and 50 touchdowns, that's nothing to sneeze at. 2nd and 3, Miller gets only 1. 3rd and 2, Tarkenton throws to Miller, but he can't hang on. Might have been a first, but to be fair, again, Tarkenton just didn't have the best accuracy today. Threw it low. Have to punt again. Oakland.
So we've talked about this, and we're big football fans. You come out of halftime, you've been dominated, you're down by 16. You get the ball, right? You need some success, right? Mm-hmm. And you need to either move that ball, get some first downs, change the field of position, aspect of it, maybe get a chance for some points. The Vikings need to do something different. They need to get something going. They get a little bit here, and then it's all common story, right? We saw in the first half, it just fizzes out on them. They don't get the big play, they don't get the pass, they don't get the first down. And here we are, just a few minutes into the second half, and they already have to punt. And gotta be those lingering thoughts about falling behind and not just being able to meet the challenge and struggling against a great defense, and all of that is still got to be festering in people's minds, fans, teammates, coaches. Yeah.
Oh, it's brutal. Well, Oakland starts on their own 16, and they're the ones who don't have to sort of try to be creative, but they are. Stabler tries a rollout, doesn't work, looking for Branch, but it's incomplete. So they're going to go back to the ground because that's working. Van Egan just uses pure power. Doesn't get that much of a hole, but he's enough of it where he's getting 6. Davis gets it next, and this time there is a gaping hole. 13-yard rush, and Krause again has to be the one to tackle a running back. O-line's just been so good. And again, like we talked about this before. I just was writing down here. We've got 2 Hall of Fame wide receivers, and the running backs are not. Whenever I get to the top 50 Raiders of all time, because I do top 50 of all the teams, and I haven't got there yet. I don't know that Van Egan might. I don't think Davis will be, but you're doing that with your Hall of Fame line.
Yeah.
So Madden might have had a different plan going into it. I'm sure he did, but this is working. So do it. Just win, baby.
Yeah. Well, you're dominating the game. You're being able to run the ball, like you say. Mm-hmm. It's working. Whatever your strategy was coming in, if this was what it is, it's working. Whatever emerged as the game played out, it's working.
Yeah.
And if you're up that, you've got. Why not? We can. It's early, but we can burn clock. We can move the ball. We can fill the possession. We can do all of that.
Defense is working, so
and our defense is can handle the task. So we're just going to keep doing what works and hold on to this lead and not try to get too fancy or mix things up. It's working for us, so let's just keep going at it. Mm-hmm. And we get a first down or moving the ball, and that's helping us burn clock time. And here we go. And our defense is doing great. So let's keep with the task because it's working.
Absolutely. Van Egan gets it next for 7 yards, but Jeff Siemens had enough. Tackles Davis for only a 1-yard gain, and same for Banaszak. So he's the one who the tackler came up on both of them. Raiders can stay conservative, so they're going to punt on 4th and 1. It's not Guy's best punt, but Guy's bad punts are still better than almost everyone else's in this era. Willis also slips in the return, so Minnesota's only got a 1st and 10 on their own 25. It could have been a little bit more. It wasn't a greasy field. We've seen a lot of greasy fields.
Yeah.
Sometimes your feet just fail you. It just happens. Minnesota sticks with Chuck. He rushes for 4, then 5. And as they're lining up, as my wife walks by in the camera.
Sorry. I'm so not used to this side.
Yeah, I noticed that.
We had a guest star up here.
Yeah, yes, sir. It's also Chevy Chase and I'd say Mrs. Buchner, but she didn't take my name. I don't blame her.
I'll let you work that out later.
No, there's nothing to work out. Nothing to work out.
20 years.
20 years. There's nothing to work out. What's your first ever appearance?
There you go.
Up here.
Apparently. Yeah. All right. So as they line up on first down, Oakland was ready, and they stuffed that. They stuffed Borman, and John Matuszek is credited with the tackle. And now it's time for the game show. What is Paul's favorite John Matuszek's Hollywood movie? Is it A, North Dallas 40, where he portrayed O.W. Shattuck? Is it B, in Cavemen, where he portrayed Tonda? Or is it C, in The Goonies, where he was Sloth?
Oh, I forgot about C. Oh, I would have went A, but I'm kind of leaning towards C now. Yeah.
Well, whatever you say is the right answer. So
Let's go with C. What the heck?
there you go. It's all good.
Great movie.
It's the game show you were going to win no matter what. I looked at his TV credits just for fun. A lot of spots on 80 shows, 3 times where he played a character named Elmo. One in MASH, he played a corporal named Corporal Elmo, something or other. Well, then he was Elmer in a Silver Spoons episode, and Elmo the Handyman in an episode of Amen. Died in age 39, overdose.
Yeah. And we talked earlier in our preface to the game, right, that the crazy wild Raiders and all the characters and assemblage of guys here. And there's some classic, and he's one of them. And I think probably if you wanted to kind of pick the typical kind of crazy, wild, maniac Raider on this team, you couldn't do worse than this guy.
Wait till we get to Alzado.
Yeah, we'll get to that. There's some contenders.
Yeah.
Most teams only have one, but the Raiders got a bunch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny because Matusik just was somebody who always seemed, because I saw so much of him, right? You almost like in retcon history think that he was like a greater football player than he was.
Yep.
Alzado to a lesser degree. I mean, Alzado was the better player overall, but still, it's funny how fame will sort of do that. Didn't do anything for Alex Karras to get him into the Hall of Fame until he was long since dead, but that's for a Lions fan to get mad about, not me. Vikings, we'll have to punt again, and Clavo punts again for only 31. Good return by Colsey, and Oakland's got it 1st and 10 on their own 46. So, man, Van Egan rushes for 7, and another great hole, 18.
Yeah.
Biletnikoff, though, was one who threw a key block. Again, you look at that body. How is he throwing a key block? Because he just is.
He's just getting away from somebody. Whatever you need to do to. Yeah.
Oakland 1st and 10 on the Minnesota 29, and we've got one of the few good defensive plays from Minnesota, or from the front 4, I should say. Page slips his blocker, and I think, like we were just saying, he's a legend, first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's not the same Alan Page. Tackle for loss, Van Egan for a 4-yard loss. Stabler overthrows Biletnikoff in the end zone, and on 3rd and 14, Stabler again's got so much time. Branch gets 10 yards. It's not enough for a first down, but like a 40-yard field goal. Come on, Errol Mann's not going to make this. Not from what we've seen.
Yeah.
Dowdy says as much. He's only 1 for 7 from 4.
I saw that. Yeah.
And you're a Vikings fan. Well, the only thing I got going for me is that Guy hasn't been we've been able to block Guy once, and man sucks. And then he makes a 40-yard field.
Yeah. I know. You begin to think, you wonder, like, we've bashed a lot of special teams so far in these Super Bowls.
And we won't later, but yeah.
But it really, he kind of strikes you like it's getting a little better, but really, I mean, can imagine being on the sidelines and it's kind of like, this could go either way. I mean, it's literally like, here's a perfect example. He missed a short, he doinked one earlier in the game, right? It's just like anything could happen here.
Yeah. Missed the PAT, right? It's like, he's not making this. And then he does. And it's straight in. I mean, it's not high, but it's straight down Main Street.
And the Raiders are up 19-0. And it's not looking good. We're marching on the way towards a blowout here.
Until we have the most interesting drive of the game.
Yes.
Minnesota's 1st and 10 on their own 32 after the return from White. Good return by him. The Vikings, who have not been lucky all game, are now getting lucky. And I'm wondering, are the Raiders getting sloppy? Maybe a little overconfident here. First play of the drive, a flag is thrown before Tarkenton even threw. It was incomplete to Foreman, but he was smothered anyway. It's a motion call. Oakland declined that, so it's 2nd and 10. Tarkenton's pass is batted back at the line of scrimmage by Dave Rowe. We haven't talked about him much. And 3rd and 10, looks like it's over. Sister whacks Tarkenton's arm as it in motion, calling it an incomplete pass. Vikings are forced to punt. But on Claybo's punt, Hendricks ran into him.
Yeah.
5-yard penalty, automatic first down. So it's like a do-over because you're only 5 yards better off. 1st and 10 on their own 37.
But you're still alive.
It's still alive.
Yeah, you get the ball.
It's luck.
Hendricks the Stork, is his nickname, makes an appearance here. But if you're looking for a break, and you're the Vikings,
you need it.
You just got one.
Yeah, and you're getting a couple more.
You're not out of it, but you better start making something happen. But if you need the break to kind of kick started, you got yourself one here. Let's see what you can do with it.
Yeah. Foreman rushes for 1, and on 2nd and 9, Tarkenton's got time, and they're using their tight end, so it's Stu Voigt, first catch of the game, I believe, and we're in Oakland territory. All right. Tarkenton drops back, but I always pronounce this wrong. Villapiano.
Yeah.
Gets a 4-yard sack, his only of the game. 2nd and 14, Tarkenton drops way back, sees Foreman. It's a short 4-yard gain, but a flag was dropped before the pass is completed. It's holding. 5 yards, automatic first down. You take it where you can.
So here we go, right? Two breaks, 2 automatic first down. On penalties. We haven't seen a lot of penalties. We talked about the fact that there weren't a lot of penalties that were shifting the game, but in this particular drive, and we got 2 key penalties against the Raiders that keeps drives alive for the Vikings when they really needed it bad.
All right, there you go. 1st and 10, you almost think they're going to go to Foreman, but they don't. It's a perfect pass to Rashad, and he holds on this time. 25-yard gain. 1st and 10, Oakland 25. And, it's sort of good. I mean, Foreman, Rashad had to be sort of like beating himself up, but you got to get their confidence back. And the way to do that is to go back. Because he's your number 2 wide receiver. I guess he's your number 1 at this point. Or
the way the game's playing. Yeah.
He had the better year, but.
Yep, I think you're right.
Yeah. A pitch to Foreman gets 4 yards. And while they're waiting on the next play, Gowdy says something interesting. Actually, we already talked about that. I jumped ahead because he's mentioning how many players appeared in the Rose Bowl.
Okay.
Which we don't even know what that's going to look like later. I don't know. Tarkenton goes for White in the end zone, incomplete. Again, Thomas was all over him. Skip Thomas was just fantastic. But as they thought that maybe it should have been pass interference. Gowdy and Meredith were not really sure. So that could have gone either way. But as it happened, Thomas skidded into the barrier, comes up holding his knee. So he had to be helped off. He was limping bad. And as they're sort of trying to kill time, Meredith says some interesting stuff. I love Meredith in this game. I've never loved him more because sometimes he's annoyed me, as I've said, but not today. He said that Thomas does not like having his picture taken, and every time it happens, he says it takes a little piece of his soul. And his perfect Southern drawl, don't know what that means.
None of us do.
I said, I don't either, but then they showed us the picture of Thomas, and I said, he's got the most soul to lose. It just looks so damn cool. I don't know how else to say it. Apparently,
I don't know, but that's weird.
Nicknamed Dr. Death, and that's what he had on his truck, apparently.
Yep. Like I said, there's some real characters here.
Foreman rushes for only 3, and it's 4th and 3 on the Oakland 18. Field goal's not going to cut it. They know this, and I think also, too, we got to remember, it's not like when we're at down 16-0 at halftime, I mean, now we'd say that's still a 2-score game. Not then. Grant sort of knows this. He goes to Chuck Foreman, and Tarkenton throws to Chuck for a 10-yard gain. So we got 1st and goal on the Oakland 8. Tarkenton throws to Sammy White. See, now it's Colsey who's coming in. So he took over for where Thomas was, and that could have been very well the difference. Colsey would have a fine career on his own, but he wasn't at Skip Thomas level yet, and we got a touchdown. PAT is good, 19-7.
Yeah, so Vikings did what they had to do. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily they're back in the game, but there's a spark there to build on. You're running out of time, and Raiders are still playing really well.
Staying at the bar.
Yeah.
If you're a Vikings fan.
Yeah.
So it's
Just
something.
in case.
They needed it.
Yep.
Cox kicks off, and Garrett with another solid return, 1st and 10 on their own 36. Vikings momentum continues a bit as, for the first time, we see the O-line collapse. 3 Vikings are descending on Stabler, and Page gets the credit for the sack, and it's an 11-yard loss. So flashes still for the grand old man here. 2nd and 21. Van Egan rushes for 3. It's the end of the quarter. We see another celebrity. I had to look up who this was. Edwin Newman. I guess he was an NBC News personality. I'm not familiar with him.
It's harder and harder to find celebrities in the fourth quarter.
You know what? You're right. I guess so. And it's also, I guess, back when there was no CNN, right?
Yeah, and yeah, if you were the lead newscaster on one of the big networks at the time, you were a celebrity.
Yeah, that's true.
Walter Concrete being sort of the most famous of those. But yeah, people watched the evening news, so millions of people would know who these guys were. Yeah, and they were all men. So.
Back then, yeah, that's true.
So we're in the fourth quarter.
It feels like a bit of a different vibe here. It's 3rd and 18. Stabler gives to Davidson a draw. It almost worked because they weren't expecting that. Get 16, but need 18. So Guy comes on to punts, and it's 1st and 10 after the return. Was it a return? Yeah, doesn't matter. On their own 22. Still a quarter left, still doable. Tarkenton throws behind Miller. That's not the worst thing, because if he would have caught it, that probably would have been a loss, right? Anyway, so that's sort of unfortunate. 2nd and 10, Miller gets it again on a rush, gets 3. 3rd and 7. Tarkenton delivers to the middle for Sammy White, and a 14-yard gain, and like tackled by Thomas. He's back. I thought he might have been out of the game after that.
And White's helmet got ripped off or flew off, which is a precursor to something we're going to see here in a couple more plays.
Oh, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. So I kind of made note of that, like it was clean and everything, but just sort of, and I couldn't quite tell. I mean, nowadays it's rare to see a helmet ripped off because the safety issue, trying to keep helmets on, and they stop the play. But of course, it's not uncommon to see that happen, but it's happening here, which is, it's going to set a pre-stage for something here. I wouldn't say it was a brutal or illegal tackle. It was a good, hard legal tackle, but when a helmet flies off, you kind of notice it.
And we're going to notice it a little bit more in a bit.
Yeah.
So we got 1st and 10 on 39, and the next play is a 2-yard loss. But I said, I've never seen a more impressive 2-yard loss.
Yeah.
36-year-old Tarkenton, not much of a scrambler anymore, but he used every bit of that he had left to just avoid a sack by Sistrunk. Gives it away to Miller, or gets to Miller just for a 2-yard loss. That I'm in awe of that.
Well, and I don't know what your impression was at this point, and this play kind of illustrated for me. And correct me if wrong. Maybe you feel different. I think the Vikings are fighting hard.
Yeah.
I didn't see them give up during this game. And they've had their struggles. They've been dominated. They're behind. They got that touchdown. There's still some time left. As we said, it's harder to come back in that era. Mm-hmm. But I saw that play, and I'm like, they are targeting, and those guys are fighting. They're fighting hard. They're trying to do everything they can. They're trying to keep in the game. They're trying to be successful here. They've got something they want to keep moving here. I was kind of kudos. I mean, because from an outsider, they're being dominated, but they're fighting hard.
Right.
And kind of impressed me that they weren't just sort of like, doing the minimum, or, as I say, mailing it in, but they're trying real hard here, even though the odds are probably against them. I was kind of impressed, and that kind of illustrated it for me, that they were trying to make something out of something,
Mm-hmm. Well, a draw to Sammy Johnson. That only gets 1 yard, so we got 3rd and long again. So this is the play that you were sort of setting up.
Yeah.
Apparently the dogs in the background are reenacting it.
So this is this target in pass to Sammy White, kind of down the middle. He's open. And then the two Raiders defenders come in. He takes kind of a good hard hit from the first guy. And then Tatum comes in. Okay, Jack Tatum. So, folks, and he just flies right into him. I mean, we're talking helmet to helmet. The helmet flies off. I mean, this was a brutal hit. No flag, by the way. And I'm like, is this guy dead? I mean,
he looked
it was a pretty brutal collision. And I think, if you want to tell the backstory, Jack Tatum the assassin was a headhunter in the sense of, the aim, and he's not the only guy in this era. Safeties are roaming the field. Guys like Cliff Harris and guys like Jack Tatum and others at free safety, and they're looking to take guys out. I mean, let's be honest about it. And what they could get away with legally, and receivers were defenseless, and defenses could, be all over the field. But I saw this, and I'm like, we see a lot of other examples in some of these Super Bowls in the 70s. The brutal nature of the game was all on display here.
Held on to it.
Yeah, that was the other incredible part. A lot of the stuff, the ball would have just flown out. But he held on to the ball for an 18-yard play. And kind of goes back to what I was saying. I mean, the Vikings are fighting. Yeah. They're fighting to stay in this game. And wow, the hit just brutal. Helmet to helmet and a whole deal. And yeah.
Incredible. First and 10 on the Oakland 44. Roll out by Tarkenton, 9-yard pass to Voigt. Second and 1, they're giving it to Foreman, and Monty Johnson gets him for a 2-yard loss, so it's 3rd and 3. So can Tarkenton get another third down? No, he cannot. He's rushed, throws on the run, and before it happens, this is why I love Meredith today. Meredith, it's not, the play's not even done yet. Meredith's going, no way, and he's intercepted because and it's Willie Hall. Brings it back 16 yards. And Meredith is again berating Tark. Actually, no, he didn't say no way. He said interception before it happened. And then after that, he's kind of berating Tark. And like, no way. Should have thrown it away.
Yeah. And I again, we've been talking a lot about this, right? The Raiders are dominating the game. The Vikings are having a hard time getting a lot to work, and they're trying to do more here. They're fighting hard. But they haven't made a lot of, I don't think, of big mistakes. But they made one here.
Because maybe they're like you were saying, though, they're trying so hard. They're trying to come up with something out of desperation. And just, I mean, you're 4-down territory anyway, right? So throw it away. Then
you're right. They're desperate. That it's kind of both sides, right? I mean, it's a critical bad mistake, but you gotta push the ball down the field, right? You gotta make a big play. You're down by this much. You're almost halfway through the fourth quarter. At this point, it's sort of like dismiss the risk. Just go for the big reward. We need to do something. Yeah.
Well, we see that
they got burned here.
I think we sometimes see a lot of that with a lot of a lot of those great quarterbacks, because they've made something out of nothing so many times. You always think you can do it again. Brett Favre, I always thought is the most overrated great quarterback of all time, because he tried to make something out of nothing, and a lot of times that burned him.
Through a lot of interceptions at key games, key juncture, key time in the game.
Ask my Saints about that.
Yep.
Because a lot of meat on that bone. But so we have Oakland at first and 10 on their own 46. Van Egan rushes for a yard, and on 2nd and 9, Davis for 3. And interestingly, Gowdy and Meredith, they're kind of lamenting, like, Madden's kind of being too conservative right now. Like, you should go for the jugular. Well, and he does. Stabler drops back, and the same story again. We got Biletnikoff wide open at the Minnesota 30, and he got to the 2 before Bobby Bryant tackled him. So that's the third catch that he almost took in for a touchdown that set them up. This is what
almost. 2 of them, within the 1-yard line, and And this one's, he gets the ball is marked at the 2-yard line. Yeah, I mean, 3 big plays. Let's not forget that. Of course, they were all huge plays. But imagine being that close 3 times. I mean, a catch for a first down that puts your team inside the 2-yard line, which any one of those could have easily been by inches, maybe in a couple of cases, a touchdown.
Especially the first one, I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then that's sort of where they're joking too. Well, we never said he was a great athlete because he was caught, but it didn't matter. They show a graphic. Oakland has now set a new record for 407 yards total offense. I checked to see what the current record is. It's the Patriots, 613 in Super Bowl 52. So we got 1st and goal on the 2, and Banasak rushes, does what he does. Rushes it for 2, touchdown. Throws the ball in the stands. Can't do that. He's going to be fined $200. He doesn't care. I wonder what that ball's worth, huh?
Yeah, if anybody still has that, which maybe they do, have thought about, hey, that's kind of cool. But
I wonder how you authenticate that stuff back then. I don't.
That's the issue, right? Go back then, and you're totally relying on that person who has the ball, who owns it, to tell you, I got it from my uncle who got it from this game. Yeah, I mean, it's probably why a lot of this stuff just doesn't show up on auction sites. People aren't trying to sell it because, you can't authenticate that. And yeah, it's a game used ball. Yeah, we could accept that. Sure. But a ball that was that touchdown that was thrown into your stands and your uncle grabbed it and put it under his coat and brought it home. Yeah, whatever, buddy. We've heard that story before.
Yeah, maybe they try to sell it on eBay or just a random ball. And then you get it like, what? Signed by Paul Tagliabue.
Yeah. Whoever has that ball probably still has it and just handed down their family with a great story. Yeah.
Now it just became sad to watch. It's 26-7 Oakland. Yeah. They were showing all these celebrities, but this time the production they really blew it here. Back from break, they try to show Al Davis, but he's completely obstructed.
Yeah. And didn't they try to circles? I don't know what they were doing there with the camera, but kind of not zooming in, but kind of isolate in.
Yeah.
And I'm looking, that could be anybody.
Because his head too, I guess there was a panel in the window, so it's right through the middle of his. Okay, well, right. Why bother to do this?
Yeah, we all know it was Jim the janitor who was just cleaning up.
Could have been. He slicks his hair. Why not?
The mythical Al Davis. Ooh.
Yeah, it's not like we haven't seen him before. God.
Yeah.
Why did
I saw that. I'm like, what are they trying to do? Didn't somebody tell the producer, this ain't going to work? No, we're going to show him. This ain't going to work. Cameraman, focus in there. I'm telling you, you're not going to see him. We're going to do it anyways.
It's not like it was okay, we'll use camera 52.
Yeah, exactly.
That they had.
Cameraman, there's only a handful of them. I can't get that shot. We're going to show it anyways.
That might have been something they wanted all the time. He probably never moved from his spot, and they only had
and they just were looking for it. Yeah, they were probably looking for the right time to. Al Davis is going to win his first Super Bowl, anti-NFL guy, and been in pro football since the 60s, and he is the Raiders, and and they mentioned at some point, he's going to get his first Super Bowl. So let's show him. Hello. Al, anybody home? Somebody knock on the window. Somebody open the window. Somebody do something.
He probably loved looking back at that.
Yeah, exactly.
Guy kicks off. White returns to the 32, and we got 7 minutes 29 seconds to go. So what are they going to do? Dumps off to Miller, gain of 3. Throws incomplete to Foreman. That's Tarkenton's fault. He threw a little too early. But gets a first down. Tarkenton throws to Voigt for a 12-yard pass. First and 10 on the 47. Drops pass again. The pass is broken up by Dave Rowe. And 2nd and 10, he drops back, but he has success this time. It's another big gain for Rashad, 25 yards. All right, so they're still.
Yeah, the Vikings. You're 6 minutes left in the game, right? You're really gonna have to throw the ball. You're gonna have to get some points. You're gonna have, They're trying to do something because they're running out of time. This is really, they got a great quarterback. They got some good receivers. They're trying to do what they can to make a game of it if they can.
And
they're
here
trying.
we go. 1st and 10 on the Oakland 28. Disaster. Willie Brown, the 14-year vet and eventual Hall of Famer, read this. Cuts in front of Sammy White, runs it back, 75 yards. Nobody touched him.
Yeah, and when you watch the game, you get the typical game camera position.
Yeah.
But NFL Films, of course, at the time, and was shooting their own film, right? They would produce the NFL highlights and the NFL film package, etc. And they have, to this day, one of the most iconic video shots ever taken by NFL Films is a view from the end zone, focusing in, and you see Willie Brown running down the field, right into the camera with that ball in isolation, running right into the end zone. It's a classic NFL Films image. It is the most iconic image from this game. It's also one that I think is in the hierarchy of the greatest kind of big plays captured by NFL film, and that artistic kind of different view and perspective of it that you see with this game. That's great. And the other great part, and I'm pretty sure I caught this right, or maybe I'm just making it up. Did not Danny Don Meredith suddenly launch into his turn off the lights, the party's over?
I don't know.
Did I hear that, or am I imagining?
You might have. I missed that.
Somewhere along in here, I think he drops that in, and I think it was somewhere right around here.
54 career interceptions, first ballot inductee in '84.
And it's great when you watch this because the commentators are noticing all of the Raiders are on the sidelines. They're all gathering up to congratulate this guy and who's had a great career. He's at the very end of it, and they talk about the Raiders, as a fraternity, so to speak, or how supportive and how great all of the players were in support of one of their great veterans around Willie Brown. So it's kind of a neat capstone to them for the game, and the game is over.
Oh yeah. So it didn't matter that man missed the point after. Of course he did.
We've covered that, but yeah.
Well, I wrote down that the Vikings fans are experiencing a level of sadness and frustration that I've been in the football world, I think, unparalleled to that time. I think we wouldn't see that until Buffalo, which would be worse because you lost 4 straight. But I wrote down, it's like I might well be watching a corpse because it's 1st and 10. If he didn't sing, if Danny Don didn't sing that, I'll put a note here as I sort of do the sort of post edits here. He might as well have, because they're giving up now. They gave up. Bob Lee's in at quarterback.
Yeah, we got backups all over the place, right on both sides. I don't think they really show much of the Raiders. I don't recall seeing them, but I'm sure the Raiders are celebrating. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, celebrating. Yeah, they showed a lot.
Yeah, celebrating the sidelines, or we're counting down the clock. We're under 6 minutes. Yeah. It's over, and it's kind of sad. I think you see a shot of Tarkenton sitting on his helmet in the sidelines. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not his fault. They were outplayed, outmatched, and but yeah, I think you're right. This is a team that's been around for a while, not had any success or losing another Super Bowl. I think, as we mentioned, I think we previewed the beginning of this game. This is probably their last shot in this kind of grouping of Vikings, and it would be. And this is their shot to kind of win that, and nothing worked, and they were dominated all game. A few sparks here and there, but they were beat by the better team.
Meredith said something I found really interesting, and it made me wonder if he even likes Fran Tarkenton. Fran Tarkenton. I don't know why I said Tarkenton. He said, that's all right. Fran will make more money than anyone else here. Why are you saying that? Is that a shot? Is that a shot at him? Is that a shot at everyone? Is that just being arrogant and being completely out of touch, not knowing that's?
It kind of sounds snarky and kind of petty. He's a great quarterback, well paid, Meredith left the game at a time when quarterbacks or players weren't making a lot of money, and he was frustrated and left the Cowboys in '69 after repeated playoff failures, which weren't all his fault. He's moved on to media. He's actually televising this game with NBC, but he would return and be a big iconic part, of course, of Monday Night Football in the 70s and 80s. I don't know what he's getting at with that kind of. It kind of seemed like a
Tarkenton essentially becomes his backup because he would do all the fill-ins.
Yeah. I don't know what he's doing there. I mean, if you look at the end of the stats of the game here, in a lot of ways, the quarterback play wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. Sabler went 12 for 19, 180 yards in one touchdown. But Tarkenton went 17-35, 205 yards. Yes, one touchdown, 2 interceptions, which hurt, but they came later. We know the context there. So I don't think this was Fran Tarkenton's fault in losing the game. We talked about Chuck Foreman. 44 yards rushing, 62 yards receiving. But the stat that gets at you, right, is just the rushing game of the Raiders. Davis had 137 yards. Van Egan had 73. The Raiders would dominate 266 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. 429 total versus Vikings 353. Fumbles, but Minnesota had the 3 turnovers, 6 total penalties, so not a lot of them. And kind of the crazy weirdness thing about this whole thing is, you talk about the dominance, we keep talking about it, but who was the MVP of this game?
Oh, Biletnikoff.
Yeah. We noted, right, he hit it with 4 catches for 79, along of 48. We talked about how close 3 of them were to touchdowns, and they were all 3 great key catches. So, yeah, there's justification for that. Maybe if Davis had 1 touchdown to go along with his 137 yards, but the key catches were from Biletnikoff were important. Mm-hmm. But as far as Super Bowl MVPs go, probably, and I think I'll segue right into you because you mentioned earlier in the game, who really probably should have been.
Most of their rushing plays were also to the left, where Shell and Upshaw were. I mean, I would have had them as co-MVPs personally, yep. But offensive linemen will never get that.
Yeah, so we all know that. But we can
bring her up here.
But Kirk, we can assign MVPs to whoever we want. You and I can. And absolutely. I think you're absolutely right.
So apologies. I'm just going to whip through the last 5 minutes because it's more interesting what was going around than the actual plays.
Sorry, I got ahead of us by wrapping up the game.
Well, kind of, yeah. But I mean, there's still 5 minutes, but a lot more plays. But I was more interested in all the stuff around it. Bob Lee, I never heard of him. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But he played 12 years, mostly backup in Minnesota. He only had 1 year really as a starter in Atlanta, where I guess they called him the General Lee, which maybe you don't do now, but whatever. They flashed a stat, and this is another stat that they got wrong. And they came up with the thing for Lee, and it was for his season, which was 30 attempts, 13 completions, and a pass completion percentage of 50. Well, wait a minute. 13 out of 30 isn't 50. I'm not a mathematician, but I know this. I checked it out. It was actually he went 15 for 30, but I just found that fascinating. It's a little interesting glitch. I guess maybe they typed it up and they weren't really sure because they weren't expecting to see him in the game.
Yeah, it's probably true.
Lee completes to Miller for 5, scrambles for a 4-yard rush, 4th and 1. What Vikings fans who were there, I think it was more Oakland fans, but they were starting to boo. They're going for it in 4th down, and Foreman can't do it. Turnover on downs. For Oakland, Mike Ray comes in on quarterback. He was a rookie. Well, not really a rookie. He was played at USC, drafted by Oakland 3 years before, but wasn't offered a contract, so he played for the Argonauts for 3 years, and he returned this year as Stabler's backup. only 4 years in the league, 2 here, 2 in Tampa, 1,500 yards. So whatever. He's got a Super Bowl ring. Van Egan rushes for 4, and we got Hubert Ginn. He makes his first appearance. This guy's a vulture. He won 2 Super Bowls with Miami. He had 32 combined return yards in the Miami playoffs. Never started a game in his 90 games. Never the primary even returner even in his career. This guy's got 3 Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? Talk about being the right guy at the right place at the right time.
He must tell the best jokes. They must just love this guy. Well, he gets a 9-yard rush, and that's enough for first down. The Vikings are bringing in their backups. We're just playing for time here. Ray is sacked by Sutherland. Van Egan rushes for 3. Ray is sacked. Ray gets 11-yard rush himself, escaping the Vikings attack. And that's when they announce Biletnikoff as the MVP. And I wrote down, just like you said, if Davis would have got that TD, he would have probably done that. And we already sort of talked about what I said, because I said I would have given it to the O-line, but we already went there. They're just playing it out. Ginn rushes for 4 on 4th down, no gain. They're just might as well. Minnesota's got it on their own 14, so the commentators are barely paying attention. Neither are the people on the sidelines. I don't even know if it's even I don't know how much to even really pay attention here. Lee will get a completion, getting to White at the 33. Completes to Sammy Johnson for 7. He's another career backup, Sammy Johnson. 62, there you go. 62 games, never started one of them either. Only 830 yards, and I wrote down, Gowdy and Meredith aren't even paying attention. Meredith is telling a story about how he was almost recruited by Bear Bryant. Production, the TV crew, they're looking at the sidelines, looking at the reactions of the winners and losers, and they're right to do so. It's more interesting. Then I wrote down, Dandy Don said what I just said. He notices how nobody's even watching from either side, including him. They're not even calling plays. They finally do get a touchdown because, again, they're playing soft coverage. They don't care. It's like Pro Bowl at this point because they don't want to get hurt. Nobody wants to get hurt at this point. The crowd goes mild as Lee gets a touchdown pass to Voigt. PAT is good. 32-14, 21 seconds left. Kneel down. Win. Over. And then we get that iconic image. That was the last thing I wrote down. And you've got it right there. You'd think that we prep. We don't. Or we don't tell each other what we're going to say because we've got this flow. We are the Meredith and
Gowdy.
Are we, though? I mean, man, if I'm doing play-by-play and I'm the one telling all the bad jokes, what the hell am I?
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of another iconic image from the game, John Madden, and he would not have a long coaching career. A lot of these players, of course, would stay on with the Raiders into the 80s, and Tom Flores would become his heir apparent and take up that team. And he left football entirely. And it wasn't like a coach who moved to another job, or maybe a coach who said, I want to be a GM. He hated, we all know the kind of myth and story behind Madden. He hated flying, and he hated a lot of other aspects of the game. And he walked away from football, in the late 70s, still a top coach. And what we would then start to see him as a TV analyst, and he would build a very, some would argue even a more successful career in football, but as an analyst.
I'd agree with that.
Decades with different networks, and of course his work on sponsoring EA Madden football game, one of the first successful sports video games, and that's a lot of people know him from those two things. But it all started here, and this is the pinnacle. Very successful coach, has a really good winning record, has the 1 Super Bowl, is in the Hall of Fame. But I think for a lot of people, a shorter career maybe than many people would think, and but a very, very good career.
As a coach?
Well, this is where kind of the controversy lies a little bit. When he went in as a coach, actually through the senior committee route, which at the time there was no coaches category. So whether you were a modern or a senior coach, you fell into those pool with the players and GMs and everybody else. The coaches were only added as a separate category in 2020, and the other contributors a few years before that. So he went in as a coach, and voters said, like a player, we can only talk about what they did on the field, in the meeting and in debate and presenting him as a candidate. But of course, everybody in the room who's a voter on the senior committee, and then when he went up and was elected by the full, was then probably a 48-member committee, were well aware, of course, of his success as a broadcaster. And
they all probably love the guy.
Sorry?
I said they all probably love the guy. I don't see how
you
like him.
But he for a guy with I could find his coaching record here. Didn't have a long career, but it was a very very successful one. Not only the Super Bowl, but this guy 100. So he started in '69, and he would finish after the 1978 season. So he had a couple more seasons with the Raiders. He would retire. 142 games, 103 wins, 32 losses, 7 ties. I believe a .759 winning percentage with over 100 games is phenomenal, actually. In the playoffs, 16 games, 9 wins, 7. But the real, as a coach, the Super Bowl, and the fact that when he was a coach of the Raiders and in those seasons, 10 years, they had 6 seasons with 11 or more wins. So never a losing season. And so a great sustained excellence, a team with a lot of regular season and in the playoff success. And this is the pinnacle here. If it hadn't had to go head to head with teams like the Dolphins and the Steelers, probably, and those brutal matchups of 2 other great teams in the 70s from the AFC, they might have had another shot at a Super Bowl. But a great coach, iconic coach who we only lost very recently.
Yeah,
he died in 2021. So
I went on a YouTube. You ever go and get into YouTube rabbit holes?
Mm-hmm.
I got on a YouTube rabbit hole. I don't know why, of the old Miller Lite commercials.
Yeah,
it was like I don't know how many of those. Just watching these old beer. Actually, I do know why, because I think I got inspired from the last one where it was like there was a bear who wanted to play basketball or something. I don't know what it was. It's just.
Yeah, he joined CBS as a color commentator in 1979 and started at the bottom, kind of, and then worked his way up in terms of
when did he get paired with Summerall?
Yeah, he elevated to the top broadcasting duel in just a couple of years, with Pat Summerall starting in 1981, replacing Tom Brookshire, and then he would be with CBS all the way to 1993.
94, right?
And then he moved to Fox Sports when they gained the rights to the NFC Championship game. And then he had a shorter stint with ABC on Monday Night Football from 2002 to 2025. And then NBC Sports when they started Sunday Night NFL. So he was a major analyst, top team analyst for all 4 major sports networks in his career. Did radio and other things we've mentioned as well. And people right famous for he picked his own Madden team. Yep. He picked his own most vulnerable player that won the Galloping Gobbler when he was covering Thursday or Thanksgiving games.
Duckin, I think.
And then 1984 created the All Madden team. And then later, as we mentioned, got involved with a lot of advertising, commercials, and then what started off as John Madden football, because he lent his name to that when EA Sports Electronic Arts would start to do that, and then would later become Madden NFL games that many fans in the 90s and 2000s are familiar with that because it came very, very
God, he said yes to that, right? Because Madden's not playing video games.
Yep.
He could have easily turned that down. It's not like he's going to have to do that. Okay, you just have to do some voiceover work and just do some commercials. Like, okay. But what if he thought that was beneath him? I mean, the amount of money he would have, granted, obviously he didn't need it for everything that's going on, but now he's gone. And I would imagine, maybe Vinny might know this. I wonder, because they're not going to change the name of that. So
I just was checking. So the EA Sports series continued to use his name, imagery and license following his death, and announced, I didn't know this, there's a Madden Day, which is June 1st, in 2022, that all editions of Madden NFL 23 would feature him on the cover. And so, yeah, his branding is continuing with that beyond his passing. So that iconic role he played, and everything continues.
That's my football voice growing up, really. My teens, and you laid it out, my teens, 20s, 30s, it was Summerall and Madden. I mean, I was crushed. Maybe not crushed is the right word, but I was upset when Summerall retired. And it was the end of that pairing. I just love those two together. That will be my favorite of all time. So usually I plug things, but I'm just curious now. Who's your favorite announcer? I guess obviously only in football, that a lot of people hate.
I don't know. I don't really fall into the hate kind of. I watch the game. I enjoy the game. I don't really spend too much time. I mean, let me give you an example as a guy who I think a lot of people hate, but I really don't have any big deal with is Chris Collinsworth.
Okay, that's mine. All right, I really like him, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, but there's a lot of hate there. I don't really get it. I mean, I hear hate about guys like, obviously I know I followed Romo and Aikman as players, but they are major. They're teamed up on major networks, right? And but I never really got the hate for play-by-play and commentators. And frankly, I get there's good ones, I get there's bad ones, but hating them, I don't really care. And frankly, if they were annoying, I just turn off the sound.
There you go. Well,
there was a period there, right, when the group, I forget the grouping, but it was really bad for a few years on Monday Night Football a few seasons ago, and I just couldn't tolerate all that, and I would just turn the volume off. So yeah, if you ask me, that's one that I know a lot of people hate. Joe Buck is another one. I don't really get that either. I think he's pretty good, but he gets a lot of hate. I think a lot of fans just pick on personalities, guys they don't like. I don't know. Whatever it is, they just sort of bandwagon attack some of these guys. Whatever. I don't really care. I'm not one to kind of make a big deal about it. I'm there to listen to the game. Like I say, if I don't like somebody's commentary or play-by-play, I can follow the game with the volume turned off.
There you go. All right. Well, I'm just going to plug some of the other things that we do here.
The Buchnerverse. Let it go. Let's go.
All right. Well, usually I do it like this. All right, Winnie, help me out. Buchnerverse. Okay. Paul and I are involved in something that we just started. So even though this will probably go live a couple months later, this project will still be very much in what we're doing. I came up with this idea. What if the Pro Football Hall of Fame started in 1946 as opposed to 1963?
Yeah.
So we've assembled some voters. Obviously, Paul's one. Paul's one of the first people I asked. And right now, as we're recording this, we're going to be announcing the finalists for the class of 1947. And it's a really fun thing where we're acting each week. We're doing preliminary, semi, finals. And if you're listening to this, chances are you may want to be a part of it. If you're not already, hit either Paul and I up. We're pretty easy to find, and we'll gladly have you aboard. Our only thing is just don't be a dick. Pretty easy, a requirement, huh?
Well, this is going to go on for a while. We got many more years to, So if you're not as well vested, and many of us aren't, we're kind of learning more about guys who played that early. I think we're talking about guys who played in the 20s and 30s who would be eligible for our brand new first Hall of Fame. But as this project goes on and on, we're going to start getting into guys who maybe a lot more fans are familiar with, especially longer term fans might be familiar with names or legacies of guys who played the 50s and 60s. So as this goes on, you might find a good time to jump on the bandwagon and join us.
Yeah, we've got a couple people, actually. Our friend Ron, he said that he's going to join a little bit later when he feels that he can be as expert as possible. And we have some people who are, they're sending me messages just talking about like all the research and work that they did to make this the best that they could possibly do. So that's something that we're calling that the Pro Football Hall of Fame Revisited Project. There's other shows that we do here. There's the weekly show I do with Evan Nolan where we look at pertinent Hall of Fame related news. I don't know how this is going to age as next time, but I was last night we did our recording, and again, I don't know when this is going up, but I was mentioning how Lizzo is in big trouble. I wonder how much is going to change in the next few months, but anyway, we'll see with that. I do another show with Glenn Pulowski, the greatest triathlete ever to compete in both Buffalo and Antarctica. Yeah, well, why not? It's the Classic Sports Review, and we've got a couple shows that are going to be coming out. We're going to be recording a couple more. Sometimes we're not even really looking at sports. Like the last two that we recorded was the 1994 Baseball All-Star Game, but the one before that was roller games, fake roller games. I'm not sure which one we're going to do next, but we're going to record a couple more, so look for that. If you're really into this stuff in Halls of Fame, we got a great show with Vinny Lospinuso. I mentioned him earlier. Vinny will make Hall of Fame cases for people who aren't usually heard. Some of them you will think like this makes no sense, and it'll blow your mind why it does. Like he's got this great one about former President Theodore Roosevelt. And you think, well, that can't make any sense. We'll make it make sense. The next one we're recording, that will probably go up before this. He's going to be doing Al Wistert.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. And he's got a lot of outside of the box thinking, and I really enjoy having him as a part of that. I also do a show called How the Hell Was This a Hit? And that's basically where I look at how the hell is this a hit? Kind of self-explanatory. The next one we're going to be doing. I'm not really excited about that one. I didn't pick it, but it's we're looking at Limp Bizkit and Nookie. Did it all?
Oh, yeah.
And then that's why my revenge is when I come up next. I'm doing Una Paduma Blanca. You don't know what's coming. Yes. And with that, this episode draws to an end. Wherever you are, wherever you may be, stay safe, everybody.